I hummed quietly as I moved in tandem with Alessia to the silent beat that only I could hear. One of her arms was laced around my waist, while the other was close by with her fingers interlaced with mine. The constant contact had my skin tingling with tantalizing fire. As we slow danced, my heartbeat grew heavy, and I found my face flushing. I wasn't naive. I knew what these feelings were. This wasn't the first time I've had feelings for someone, and it's not like I hadn't explored relationships with the same gender. I just hadn't expected to fall in love this hard. The worst part is, I don't even know why. Perhaps the drinks were making me like this, or maybe the drinks dredged up what I had repressed. What is it, Empress? Her words teased me gently from my thoughts as I shifted my head to look up at her. Her golden eyes stared into mine with all the adoration I could hope for. My heart lurched slightly in my chest as I fell into her gaze. Each heartbeat felt like it took an eternity as I stared at her. The heat rose in me agonizingly slowly. Nothing. A sly grin crossed her face as she tightened the grip on my waist and hand and pulled me closer to her. Not that it was a bother to me. But quite the contrary, I really enjoyed it. But I struggled with expressing myself as much as I should, and this situation really reinforced that issue. I was an emotional wreck. What are you thinking about, Alessia? I rested my head against her shoulder as we danced further on. Well, doing this with you reminded me of the last time we did this. Whatever sense of euphoria I was having was swept away by a tide of guilt and shame. I had almost forgotten what I'd done. I've changed her memories and everyone else's. Tell me about it. I didn't even believe it when she told me she didn't hate me. We were dancing together, much like this. Laced around each other in silence. She guided me along a path of her own making, and I followed along, working on eating away at my sense of reservations. Alessia, do you truly not hate me? Our pace increased slightly, and I closed my eyes to fight the wave of nausea that was growing in strength as my world swam. I would never hate you. I've told you this before. She pulled me close, and our faces were inches from each other. I know, but then I think back to what I did to you, and I can't help but think that some part of you does. Curse alcohol and its effects on me, I'm never usually like this. You gave me a life to live, a purpose to fulfill. That is something that I can never hate you for. Our dance came to a pause, and we held each other. I didn't understand why I was like this. Why was I falling for a spirit? But I stood at a crossroads now. The biggest problem that I saw was that if I pursued this, if something went wrong, then I'd risk our entire relationship. But yet, the wine that I'd had drank earlier was pushing me in the opposite direction. After all, was it so wrong to take what I wanted? I stared into Alessia's eyes as my thoughts went wild, as a handful of emotions slammed into me like a hammer. What do you feel then? That depends on you, my dearest Empress. What do you want me to feel? As the words left her mouth, I realized that she had just thrown the ball back in my court. She wanted me to make that choice. Since it's been clear from the start how she felt. Was this a romance of my doing? I crafted her with my own hands, and I guided her along a path of my making. So did this make it right? Was I forcing her to have feelings for me? Was it fair to her? The questions mounted in my mind one after the other, though, with each passing second, my mind became murkier as I tried to fight through the growing haze. Did I tell you how that memory ended? She broke the silence and brought me back to reality. No. How did it? My breath hitched in my throat as she closed the distance between us. My mind begged for what was to come, yet I was still nervous. I wanted nothing to go wrong. Yet if it happened, I knew it would take us past the point of no return. How do you think it did? Her words were sweet as they slithered into my ear. Her lips were mere inches from mine, so tantalizingly close. She kept throwing the ball in my court, which drove me nuts. A sigh escaped from my lips, and I pressed my forehead against hers. I don't know what you see in me. I shifted my arms to rest across her shoulders as I carefully enunciated each word to stop myself from slurring them. Her arms fell to my waist as we danced on. I see a woman who cares about her people. Someone who puts her people's needs above her own. One who is beautiful, caring, and the kindest woman I've ever met. You draw me in every passing day, and even though the memories I have may not be true, I can't help but fall for you. The admission of emotion was a relief to hear, and her words rekindled the fire in my chest. Alessia, is this what you want? My eyes wandered to her lips as I forced my body from meeting hers. More than anything else in this world. Her fingers dug into my back, bunching the fabric and searing the flesh underneath with the loving heat. Alessia, there will be no going back. What I'm afraid of most is if our relationship falls apart. I don't want to lose what we have now. I rested there, with my forehead against hers, staring into her eyes. Her response was pressing her lips into mine, silencing whatever complaints I may have had. At that moment, all that mattered was the sparks that flitted in my heart and the heat that threatened to melt me. Her lips were cold, but the heat from mine melded them together perfectly enough. I pulled her into me as I sank into her embrace, and the last bit of reservations faded away into the back of my mind. Alessia, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm needy, obsessive, compulsive, and above all else, I'm greedy, and I don't like to share. I pulled away after what felt like an eternity to catch my breath. And I am all yours. Forever bound to be by your side. Without a second thought, she pulled me back into another earth-shattering kiss, and for once, I felt complete. I finally have a purpose. Perhaps this wasn't so bad after all. I awoke and felt great. My eyes fluttered open, and I glanced at my screen to see if any significant notifications appeared while I was sleeping. Thankfully, nothing significant had happened. Well, domain-wise, that is. A pair of arms were laced around my waist, pulling me into a little spoon, and my heart raced in my chest as I thought back to what happened last night. My cheeks flushed as my heart rushed through my veins. Doubly so, since I can't remember what happened after Alessia kissed me. Good morning, Empress. Alessia cooed in my ear, causing my flesh to rise in goosebumps. Hey. I rolled over and wrapped my arms around her, and nestled into her. How long has it been since I've done something like this? In fact, how long has it been since I've had a relationship with someone outside of the various one-night stands that I've had? Did you sleep well? She ran her fingers through my hair, and I couldn't help but melt at her touch. Ugh, being like this sucked. I hate feeling like a giddy schoolgirl. I did. I nuzzled into her more and tried to figure out the exact chain of events that led me to this moment. I never expected this moment to come when I made her when I first arrived here. I still don't know why, but I will not complain. It was like a twisted version of Twilight, but it involved a beautiful spirit instead of a handsome vampire. Are you still going to take the day off? Her fingers ran through my hair, and a happy sigh forced its way through my lips. Probably not. Octavian wants to launch his crusade in a few days, and I need to get with Karen to figure out what the delegates want, and retrieve Nyx from him. I reluctantly sat up, pulled away from Alessia, and stretched out my body. Thankfully, I was still clothed, so nothing happened last night. Not that I would have complained about it, but I wasn't even sure how something like that would work. Are you going to tell Nyx about us? She sat up and pressed herself against my headrest, gazing at me as I walked around the room, trying to get ready for the day. Right now? No, though I'm sure she will figure it out. I walked over to my dresser and went through it to grab some fresh clothing. Not that I was dirty or stank, but now I had to keep up appearances. Alessia hummed in response next to me as I felt a pair of hands wrap around my waist and a headrest against my shoulder. I paused for a moment, relishing the physical contact. Alessia, I really need to get ready. I placed my hands on hers and leaned back into her. I know. I just wanted to spend some time with you before I went back to training with the guard. She nuzzled my neck, and I couldn't help but giggle. Stop. I swatted her away playfully as I reached into my dresser and grabbed a new, blood-red cloak with subtle patterns of black lines that stretched across its length in unworldly patterns. I decided a while ago that just having one cloak wasn't good enough, so I created a few different variants to wear outside and whatnot. Though I refuse to have anything that is overly extravagant. Simple is good. Simple is nice. When will you be back? She asked as I quickly donned my new cloak. Well, I'm gonna pick Nyx up and then have a meeting with Karen. So in a few hours, I'll be back around. I'm going to have to establish a better routine now that Nyx is here. I mainly complained about my sake since I wanted to keep grinding away at everything. You need to take it easy, though. You can't keep overworking yourself. She walked over to the corner of the room and picked up her poleaxe and cloak that she had draped across one of the chairs. I know, but it's just how I am. I threw on my sports bag after checking it to ensure that all the stuff I would need was in there, and walked over to Alessia and threw my arms around her to steal away another hug. Her arms fell across me, pulling me tightly into her. Take it easy, all right? I rolled my eyes and gave her a quick peck on the lips. It amazes me how easy this feels with her. Almost like it was meant to be. I'll do my best. I'll see you soon, okay? Of course, Empress. She gave me one last peck on my forehead before I teleported to the stronghold to retrieve my daughter, drowning in my newfound happiness. Mother! Nyx screamed as she ran over to me. Her backpack thrashed wildly on her back as she scrambled over to me as fast as she could before she crashed into me like a runaway truck. Hello there. I chuckled as I rested my hand on her raven black hair. Oh, how I've missed you so. I was worried you forgot about me, Mother. Her words were slightly muffled as she pressed her head into my stomach, pulling me as close as possible. No, never. I was just busy with some things. My face blushed slightly as I thought back to the things I was busy with. What could be more important than me? She huffed at me as she stepped back and crossed her arms, shooting daggers at me. Well, I needed a break, but I promise I didn't forget about you. I reached forward and gave her another head pat. But tell me, how did you like school? Like a switch, her whole attitude changed as she jumped up happily. It was so much fun. Karen taught me how to use magic. Look. She raised a clawed hand, and a small flame flickered in her hand. It was no larger than a small candle, but I was so happy to see her like this. Oh, look at you. I'm so proud of you. What other kinds of magic did you learn? I asked as I placed my hand on her shoulder and walked around the stronghold on my journey to find Karen. Well, Karen made me select only 3 to focus on, which isn't fair if you asked me. I wanted to learn them all. She stated matter-of-factly as she walked along with me. The more I thought about it, the more that I realized I had very little knowledge of how my system worked, so already Nyx was becoming stronger than I was. But I would pester Karen with questions like that later. So, what did you choose? Fire, ice, and wind. Karen said that once I get good with them, he would teach me more. She bobbed her head as she spoke and skipped along happily, leaving me to my thoughts. It's been a bit since I've actually taken stock of what I have for magic. I need to compile a list of all my assets so that once the war party leaves, I will be able to utilize everything at my disposal. Yes, the talk with Karen may be a long one after all. That's amazing. Which one do you like so far? Well, I like them all. Fire makes me feel powerful, ice makes me feel relaxed. But wind makes me feel fast. So I'm unable to decide. She scrunched up her eyebrows slightly as she talked. So far, I was envious of her. Using magic seems like it would be so fun, but that boat has long since sailed for me when I chose my soul class. But I really needed to get back to training before my daughter leaped ahead of me. How did all the other classes go outside of magic? Well, Mr. Flint taught me how to throw a punch, which was fun. Karen said that he would teach me how to fight in the next class, and I can't wait. Ah yes, she was growing up so fast. I also wasn't surprised that she liked to fight. She was a dragon, after all. Right now, I wasn't worried about it, but one day I fear for Flint's safety. You know, Lieutenant Flint was my teacher too. Was he really? She paused and stared up at me like I was a completely different person. He was, and it drove Alessia nuts. I looked back on that memory, and I couldn't help but grin. She was so jealous then. That doesn't surprise me. Ms. Alessia is always staring at you when you aren't looking. Nick said it so innocently, but I knew the meaning behind it. Perhaps it could be seen as a little creepy, but I know that's how she is, so it didn't bother me. Does she now? I feigned innocence as we walked further into the stronghold. A few soldiers spared us gazes, and a few bowed before us. Thankfully everything seemed like it was going well here. Yes, Mother, it's a little strange if you ask me. I chuckled as I patted her shoulder. If you only knew little Nyx, if only you knew. Alright, Nyx, I will take you home, then I need to go out and run some errands, okay? I had my hand on her shoulder as we walked around the stronghold and watched as everyone scurried about. A wide yawn split her lips, and she nodded her head. Okay, Mother. I am rather tired. I gestured for my map to appear and quickly teleported to her bedroom. First, let's get you a bath before you go to bed, okay? I landed on the floor, glided over to her wardrobe, and grabbed her some night clothing and a few towels. Perhaps I would let her choose her own clothing in the future, but for now, I at least want her to match and look nice. One day, we would have to go over what colors match and clothing types. I grabbed a nice pair of pajamas and spun around, eager to get this over with, so I could get to my stuff. Instead, I saw that she had already passed on in a heap on her bed. Well, damn, I wanted her to take a bath, but this was okay, too. I walked over to her and adjusted her slightly before tucking her into bed. She must have had a long day if she passed out this quickly. I sat next to her, ran my fingers through her hair, and stared at her sleeping form. I didn't want to be a mother for the longest time, but now I'm pretty content with it. The feeling of it being so right overrode anything else that I felt. I gave her one last pat on the head and a kiss on the forehead before I stood up. I needed to get one of the palatines and station them nearby, so that if she wakes up and I'm not there, she has someone to keep her company. Mistress. Karen gave me a slight bow as I walked into his temporary office spacing, near the back of what currently functions as a classroom. Greetings, Karen. I flashed him a smile as I sat down across from him. You are back much sooner than I expected you would be. He tucked away his hood, revealing his bleached white bones and burning eyes. Yeah, I figured I would be gone for longer, but I feel surprisingly refreshed. I stretched out a bit in the chair, trying to adjust my cloak. So I can tell. His words, as monotonous as usual, conveyed a sense of amusement, though I wasn't sure with what, but I would not pry into it. So how did the meeting with the dignitaries go afterward? Redrick has nothing new for us right now. Everything coming from us, he is content with. However, the Corinthian dignitary asks that he meet you directly at some point. The skeleton pulled open his desk and pulled out a stack of papers. Honestly, I didn't want to deal with any of the dignitaries personally. Dealing with such intense scrutiny wasn't really my thing, nor was dealing with diplomacy. I would much rather not if it could be avoided. What I was most scared of, however, was someone piercing the veil of my deceit. Eventually, you will have to meet them. You can't keep pushing that back forever. He grabbed a small manila folder from his desk and slid it over to me. I know, but for now, I want to. At least until I'm secured in my position. There is too much at stake, and I don't want to risk losing it all. I took the folder and flipped it open to read the contents. That is also wise of you. We can revisit this in the future. However, I have also compiled a list of the other delegates and what they desire. As he spoke, I looked through the carefully worded documents. Let's see here, the Thelians, which were first, were the beast kin, according to my documents. They seek to expand their borders and wish to establish an enclave within my domain for a few purposes, which were thankfully listed here for me. The first was asylum, since they were constantly under attack, followed by research and domain diving. I was perfectly fine with an enclave being formed within my domain, especially considering that if I did this, I could gain more influence, not to mention a constant source of resources and essence. I will allow an enclave. However, I expect them to pay taxes, preferably in material goods, research papers, and whatnot, and respect whatever laws I may come up with. I pulled the paper from the folder and quickly scribbled down my demands on it. The taxes can be paid every month, and if they cannot come up with material goods, I will happily take payments in coins. However, I will leave it up to you for the amount to be paid. I signed off my name on the bottom of the paper and slid it back to him. I will pass this information on to the delegate then. If anything changes, I will let you know. He picked the paper up and began to read it over while I went on the next page. Next up was the Tezcatlipoca dynasty, and what they asked for was simple. Though, in a way, it was vexing. They wanted to establish an enclave much like the Thelians, but for an entirely different reason. Karen, what do the Tezcatlipoca mean by veneration? Well, they see you have a dragon soul and a pure-blood dragon daughter. And to them, that makes you one of their great ancestors. His bones rattled like he was releasing a pent-up sigh as he spoke, and I didn't blame him. So they see me as a distant family then? I guess I could do something with that. I murmured as I looked over the sheet and read through more of what they requested. Outside of the enclave, they really wanted little from me. You could, yes. After all, you are a godling, so worship can help boost your power levels immensely. So it is something that I recommend you do if you want the boost, of course. As the words left his mouth, I froze. The chance to be worshipped as a god? It was something that I never really thought about, especially since my meeting with Mitter. In fact, the thought made me slightly uncomfortable. How much power would it give me? Gods gain power from two sources. The first is collective faith, and the second is progression. Collective faith tends to be the most powerful but is also the biggest weakness. Progression is the slowest but also the most stable. I highly recommend a blend between the two if you want to get stronger. He set the paper down on the desk and glanced back at me. The idea of being worshipped as a god felt so wrong, yet the claim to power also felt so tantalizing. I wanted to be strong, not just for me but also for everyone else in my domain. They needed me to be strong. As I thought about it, I leaned more towards taking that path. It wasn't for my own desires but for my undead. They needed a leader, and I would take it. Is there anything else about them I need to know? Well, they offered to send you a large army for the crusade, but I turned that down. If we take a full army, then we would look weak. But they wouldn't drop it, so at most, I allowed for a small detachment that would be labeled as mercenaries. I glanced down at the paper and weighed everything once more before making my choice. I signed the paper at the bottom and slid it over to him with a hollow feeling. These were such tough choices, and some of them I didn't quite feel ready for. But if this is what it takes, then it must be done. I slid the paper back to him with trepidation and felt somewhat guilty. What else is there? I asked as I went through the surprisingly small stack of papers at my disposal. One of the most vocal of the bunch was a delegate from a neighboring principality. He mostly spewed rhetoric about man's superiority and how they would reward you handsomely if you cut all relations with all the non-human factions. Even though he was a skeleton, the exasperation was heavy in words. Dealing with that would be too much of a hassle. The benefits would not outweigh the risks I would take with that. Tell them that I will not have any diplomatic and economic dealings with them. I jotted my response and passed the paper back over to him. I knew what dealing with people like that would entail, and I neither had the time, nor the patience with such things. The rest just looked like minor trade deals and establishing ties, I murmured as I looked through the last few bits of paper. I have addressed the most prominent delegates, so everything would come as secondary. For the most part, yes. The domain is expanding in ways that I didn't quite expect, though not that it's a bad thing. Just rather unique. He reached forward, took the paper from the desk, and looked it over. It wasn't something that I expected. But all is well. I placed the folder down and thought about all the stuff that would have to be made. I would have to get creative soon if I wanted to keep up with demands. There was even a chance that I would need to cut back on my sleep a bit to make sure things were moving smoothly. So Karen, with all of this stuff finished, we can now look at the next portion of our plans. I grabbed my bag and quickly drew my notebook and the map of the following domain expansion. Now, we prepare for the crusade. I unfolded the map, placed it across the table, and pointed at a few spots I had marked. So, for starters, I plan on creating various traps here, and here. The first was on the main road and would comprise a few poltergeists that would pin down the army, while a force of undead that I would raise would hit the main army. The next zone would be closer to the city and act as a minefield, something that would bog down the advancing army while I bombarded them with more undead. Not enough to harm the crusade, but enough to halt the forward advance for quite some time. The one after that would be a twofold trap. The first part was something that took some finagling to do, but once I did, it was relatively simple. I positioned various flames and explosions around the ground to emulate an artillery barrage. Something that would serve a few different purposes. The first being that I wanted to shock and awe anybody who tagged along with my soldiers. The second is to show off military prowess. But primarily since I wasn't well versed in how wars were fought in this time period. So I could be creative with what I did. The second part of the trap would be set up with many kill zones, which would catch anyone who wasn't paying attention. There were dozens of variants that I had in mind. All the way from spiked paddles that would fly out of walls to giant balls of iron that would crush anything that went in their path. But many of them wouldn't be present until they hit the main city, which unfortunately wasn't made yet. But I still have time, for now at least. I understand what you are going for. However, my question to you then is, how will you deal with the large mobs? He drew his slender skeletal fingers across the map as he gazed at it. Well, I have created a core group of undead that will function as traitor forces, mostly to counter the military coming their way. With that being said, I will not be pre-making any more mobs than I need to, mostly to save on the essence. I sat back in the chair in which I felt rather smug with myself. I planned everything on my own, and it made me feel great. Interesting. Everything looks well thought out. Then, the last question I have is, who will lead the traitor forces? He withdrew his finger and sat back in his chair, and regarded me with his gaze. Well, I will be commanding all the mobs through my interface, and there will be a boss made to match. I reached forward and carefully grabbed my map, and folded it back up. You have taken all of this pretty well. He adjusted the cuff of his cloak before he stood up. For the most part, yeah. It's becoming all the more natural for me. I stood up as well and carefully placed the folded map back into my bag. It's amazing watching you grow up. In a way, it's like watching a daughter take her first few steps. His teeth rapidly clicked together yet revealed nothing of how he truly felt. Hearing him talk made me feel warm. Having someone here who was like a father to me, telling me he was proud of me, touched my heart in a way that few could. It was all that I ever wanted. Thank you, Karen. I walked over to him and threw my arms around him, pulling him into a hug. His skeletal figure felt so fragile under my arms, like they were on the cusp of shattering under any significant weight. He tentatively gave me a pat on my back and a few bones ground together, mimicking a chuckle. It's unlike you to show emotion like this. Perhaps that mini vacation was really well needed. Maybe. I was slowly healing from all the years of trauma, and it felt like my life was coming together. No longer was my life consumed by work and constant self-hatred. Nor was I drowning my emotion in bottles of alcohol or people. Now, I have a daughter and someone who I fell for, not to mention a legion of undead that saw me as their leader. Yeah. I sighed in happiness as I pulled away from him. Anyway, mistress. I will get back to dealing with the delegates, so please let me know if you have any more need for me. He smoothed out the wrinkles on his cloak and gave me a slight bow. Of course, Karen. I was a bit sad we had to cut everything short, but that was the nature of the beast. One of these days I will have to spend more time with Karen. It's been far too long. Oh, before you go, are you sure you are okay with dealing with Nyx for 5 days out of the week? I don't want it to burden you with more work than you can handle. It's no bother at all. I enjoy spending time with her, though she can be a bit of a handful. Thank you so much, Karen. Once we get some time, I'll let you take a few days for yourself, and I'll take care of the delegates for a time. I adjusted the straps on my bag as I brought up my map to teleport over to the next expansion. That would be lovely. Stay safe, mistress. He gave me another bow, and I gave him a nod in response as I teleported away to keep chipping away the expansion. After all, the crusade was only a handful of days away. A few hours later. My day was long, to say the least. We finally finished many of the roads, and construction on many of the outskirts was going pretty well. The outskirts should be finished by the time that the primary force arrives, though my most significant source of concern will be the city. But I think I'll dip into my essence reserves a bit to speed that process up. I appeared in my office and gave everything a cursory glance. Alessia was nowhere to be seen, and Nyx wasn't here either. I opened up my map to look for them and saw that they were in the training room, and Alessia was teaching her how to use a sword. I smiled happily as I watched. Nyx looked like she was having the time of her life. A part of me felt like I should be concerned watching her swing a sword around, but I also knew I could trust Alessia. I yawned and quickly stripped out of my cloak, placed it on the back of my chair, and threw my sports bag across my desk. Once all of that was done, I meandered over to my bedroom. Once I arrived, I quickly threw myself onto the bed and slithered under my blankets. I was alone once more, but this time it was okay. I wanted to have some time to myself. After fluffing my pillow and rolling over on my stomach, I relaxed before darkness dug its claws into me and dragged me into its loving embrace. Alessia, what of the angel? Words that I recognized as my own filled my mind as a scene materialized in front of me. I sat at a table, and on that table was a chessboard. However, instead of the standard pieces, there were dozens of small effigies. All of them looked familiar, yet I could only place a handful. The angel's loyalty is yet to be determined. A being as prideful as he is powerful. A hand reached out and grasped a small gray statue of an angel and placed it on the side of the chessboard. I found my eyes wandering to the face of the woman who sat across from me, and I felt my breath leave my body. Alessia sat here, her flesh instead of the ethereal blue and green the first no. There was flesh that looked as if it were an equal blend of caramel and paleness that was kissed by the natural light of the sun. Her golden eyes flickered in the torchlight as they gazed at me, filled to the brim with adoration and love. The Inquisitor? Words left my mouth once more as I reached out towards a small statue of a man who bore a sword in one hand and a strange gun-like item in the second. He wore a set of chains across his simple robe, though his face was obscured by a strange helm that hid any identifying features. His faith blinds him to the darkness that tries to sway him. In her words, I took the statue of the man and placed it on my side. Though faith so blind is as much a sword to us as them. So be it. A man of faith is a potent ally indeed. I reached out towards another statue. One that I recognized as Alessia. My champion, ever so loyal. My words were but a purr as I gazed at my champion and placed the small effigy of her next to a smaller version of myself. Alessia said nothing, but yet she didn't have to. The smile that adorned her beautiful face said it all. I reached out again and grabbed the effigy of a monster. Hundreds of tentacles crossed its body, hiding away lumps of misshapen flesh. The test subject? An unknown variable. A conglomeration of science and magic, more rabid than sane. Easily swayed by the darkness that wishes to consume us all. With a sigh, I reached forward and placed the effigy next to a small statue of a being clad in a flowing cloak, and in its hand was a large scythe. Its other hand was outstretched as if we were beckoning us forth into its embrace. Perhaps it was our fault it fell. It could have been stopped, but now, it's too late. I reached out and grabbed another piece. This one of a knight who rose a sword high into the air, clad in plates of darkness that radiated violet energy. The Eldritch? A knight who seeks power not meant for mortals. Though he has much to lose in the face of the coming fog. I placed the knight on my side of the table, directly in front of everyone else on my side. The enemy of my enemy is but a speculative ally. I crossed my fingers as I looked at our current rosters and weighed the strengths and weaknesses. Though thankfully, we still had a few more effigies to get through. What of the grave tender? I reached out to the effigy of a man clad in a sprawling cloak. His hands were wrapped around a gnarled staff that curled down in the shape of a shovel near the bottom. An old man who has been withered by the relentless storm of time, yet day after day performed his task with an enduring sense of duty. Every day, he deals with death, so its claws are already well embedded. Perhaps he may fall, perhaps he may still be of use. She reached up, took the effigy from my hand, and placed it next to the angel. I sighed as I looked over the rest of the pieces. I reached forward and grabbed a man with an inhumanly perfect face, clad in a blood-red cloak. A single necklace sat low and was crafted in the shape of a simple silver pendant. In one hand was an enormous weapon reminiscent of a shotgun but had a few wires that seemed to dangle slightly from the stock and lead into the recesses of his cloak. In the other was a long sword with a wicked serrated edge. The Feng? Much like the Inquisitor, his faith is blinding. But he shields his monstrous nature in his faith. It is doubtful they can sway him from his path, nor his loyalty to you. I placed his statue next to the effigy of the Inquisitor. I quickly glanced at the balance of power, even judging what was left on the side as unused pieces. Alessia, I think it's safe to assume that the angel will fall. I picked up the effigy and placed it across from me, next to the specter of death. What makes you say that? She leaned forward in her seat and regarded me with her vibrant eyes. Even though the haze of the dream, it still affected me. My heart raced, and my breath hitched in my throat, though my dream self seemed as strong and collected. He is an angel scorned. A resentment is a powerful tool for any saboteur. I could feel my dream self-thoughts as she weighed the severity of what she was saying. A part of me felt it as sadness. Like a dream that was violently ripped away. Quintus, did you even give my dreams a thought, or were you too wound up in your own glory to care? Alessia only sighed as she took the piece. Sadness threatened to trickle from the corner of her eyes, and I felt my heart waver slightly at her sadness. However, I couldn't do anything since I was a prisoner in my mind. So be it then. Her words were filled with finality as she regarded the piece. The noble? I asked as I regarded the statue of a large man, who was more round than he was tall. In his hand was a goblet that was filled to the brim with blood-red liquid, and his fat face was twisted in a rictus of perverted joy, and his clothes were clinging by a few buttons. Power is but bread and wine to them. The sway of her call will prove too strong for him. He will fall, and we will lose many people with it. She reached out and took the man and placed it on her side. Alessia, no matter how we play this game, our chances of winning fall each time. With the fall of such an affluent figure, I felt my feelings fall all the more. I still had more pieces to the side, a countless amount of them, but I knew it wouldn't be enough, especially to counter the fall of the noble. We can win. I know we can. Alessia sat up and moved one piece forward to start the game. Can we? I replied as I moved the Inquisitor 2 blocks forward. I'm sure of it. She shifted the angel forward 2 blocks, sat back, and regarded the board. Perhaps I am too caring about the matter. Sacrifices can be made if needed. I moved my Inquisitor forward and engaged him with the angel, so I could move more pawns from my side. The two quickly engaged in a fight, leaving the noble open, which I didn't hesitate to jump on. The Feng cut down the noble without a problem, but sadly at the cost of the Inquisitor's life. Be wary of the sacrifice, Empress. It doesn't always pan out as you would think. She moved the angel forward into my now exposed flank, which I quickly countered with the knight. The two clashed briefly before the knight was cut down, and the angel quickly pushed forward. At least until I moved Alessia's piece into play. The two clashed fiercely before they both cut each other down. I felt my mood darken as I stared at the destroyed chest piece. My mood darkened, but before I could say something, I felt myself get torn from my dream. I sat up in my bed, gasping for air, my body covered in sweat. I couldn't help but dwell on what I saw, yet more questions than answers filled my mind. What was that game? What were those statues? I chewed on the thoughts, at least until I felt a familiar pair of arms wrap around me. Are you all right? I stiffened slightly, shocked by the contact, before relaxing into her embrace. Yeah, just a rough dream. I hid the truth from her, mostly since I didn't want to bring it up. There was still a lot that I needed to work on mentally. I wasn't even sure if she had memories of what happened then. She rested her head against my shoulder, and I took a deep breath. Part of my mind was still dwelling on what had occurred. Do you want to talk about it? No, I think I'm okay. I turned my head towards her and flashed her a happy smile. Ugh, my heart. I felt like a schoolgirl. Damn my emotions. She stared at me, regarding me with her golden eyes. My skin prickled slightly, and my heart jumped in my chest. As you say, Empress. She pulled away from me and stood up, giving me some space to get myself together. Anyway, what did I miss? I cleared my throat as I tried to calm my thudding heart. I needed to change my clothes and get ready to start the day. Not a lot. Troop casualties have been steady from the 1st Legion. But that is to be expected. The 2nd has yet to suffer any and is still awaiting deployment as we speak. As she spoke, I stood up and wandered over to my closest and rifled through it for some clothes to wear. That's good. I'll send another batch of reinforcements soon to Ricard. I hummed as I picked out an ocean blue cloak and a simple tee and pants. As for everything else, well, Nyx is at school now, and everything is going smoothly for the most part. At her words, I paused. Did I really miss taking her to school? How long was I out? I spun around to meet her, feeling sad I missed taking her to school and also the fact that I missed such much of my day. It's going on mid-afternoon now. She was leaning against a wall. Her arms were crossed, and her head tilted slightly to the side. Why didn't you wake me up? My words came out a bit more pouty than I intended, but I couldn't help it. I've enjoyed the pattern of my life, and now I feel like I missed something important. You've looked tired lately, so I just let you sleep and have time for yourself. I was touched that she cared. I really was. But Alessia, I don't want to miss out on anything with her. I felt my motherly instincts kick in as I thought about the time that I lost with her. What if she grows up too fast? What if I miss something? My lady. You will miss far more than that if you don't take it easy every once in a while. She raised an eyebrow at me, daring me to argue with her more on the matter. I know, but still. I clenched my cloak slightly before I sighed, deciding to not pursue the topic anymore. She broke away from the wall and sauntered over to me, quickly lacing her arms around my waist. Worry not, Empress. You have nothing but time with her. I kept the cloak in my hand as I threw my arms around her and closed my eyes. I know. Maybe I'm just overthinking. Perhaps. She pulled away, giving me a chance to finish getting dressed. Would you mind training with me for some time? I want to work on a new style that would suit me. I turned away from her as I pulled off my shirt and quickly stripped from my bra. Not that I was super self-conscious of myself. I just wanted to tease her slightly. Sure, what do you have in mind? She stuttered slightly as I felt a gaze burn into my back. Good, exactly what I wanted. I reached out and grabbed a new set of underwear. Well, I have a heavy focus on ki and soul. I have a set of claws that I want to mix into melee. I quickly shifted out of my underwear and threw on the new stuff. Well, I'm sure we can figure something out. Perhaps a sword would match well enough, but I'm sure we can. Experiment. Her words felt distant as her gaze lingered on me. Sure. That works. I slid my t-shirt on, followed by my pants before I spun around to face her. Her eyes quickly met mine, and I mentally grinned, knowing exactly where she was looking. Anyway, let's go. I threw my cloak on and walked over to her, eager to get back to training. After all, I can't let my daughter get ahead of me. A few days later, I rested my polearm against a chair positioned slightly across the war table. We have lost contact with the outposts here, and here. As I spoke, I reached out and pointed out each one. All three were close to the stronghold, which didn't bode well for us in the slightest. We have also lost contact with a few scout parties, as well as some squads sent to check out the location and bring it back into the fold. That is troublesome. Octavian's voice was as thunderous as usual. But he regarded the map with well-practiced eyes. Usually, the outsiders sack and leave, but whoever is doing this seems to have something specific in mind. Do you think the delegate known as Redrick has anything to do with this? My gaze lingered on the map for a moment as a bad feeling coiled in my stomach. No. It's doubtful. He has too much to lose. Perhaps I should start evacuation procedures. I can take the princess and all other vital assets to the Palatine stronghold. At least for a time. If an assault is coming, we better be prepared at least. If that is the case, I might delay the crusade for a day or so or bait out whatever may lurk in the forest. Crush them and then march forward to take the town. He tapped at the map with an abnormally large finger. His flesh looked withered and looked sickened in the faint candlelight. You can bait them out. However, I want to get the princess away from here before any fighting starts. If something were to happen to her, the Empress would have my head. I reached out and grabbed my poleaxe. Everything I needed to do was almost done. I just needed to get to Lord Charon and then to Nyx. Of course. The princess is of the utmost importance. I will position troops around the forest to act as an early alarm system. Once you are out of danger, we will begin the operation. He pushed away from the table and crossed his massive arms. Good. Stay safe out there, Octavian. I spun the axe around, rested it on my shoulders, and gave him a curt nod before making my way out of the room and into the stronghold. All the troops were busy bustling around, mainly to ensure that they were prepared for the stronghold to get attacked. It was something that didn't happen often, and only the most daring of the outsiders had attempted to do it. But each time they tried, it was always in large numbers. I glided across the ground, ignoring all the gazes that had turned my way. I didn't have time for it all. I came to the classroom door and quickly pushed it open. Charon stood in front of a large blackboard with a single piece of chalk as white as his bones. Upon that blackboard was a diverse set of runes and what they meant, but I had no genuine interest in any of that. Nothing that my blades couldn't take care of. Charon, I've come to retrieve the princess. My words filled the space between us, and I saw Nyx perk up from her desk at my words. There are signs of an assault coming to the stronghold. I've really come to take all the high-value assets out of here. I sent the words across the mental link to not spook the Empress daughter. Ah, I see. Nyx, you are free to go. He clacked his jaw together, set the piece of chalk down onto its metal home, and shot me a glance. The stronghold is supposed to be under a ceasefire for now. Are you sure? The child quickly shoved all the papers on her desk into her small backpack. Okay, Mr. Charon. Though she sounded sad, I was sure that she wasn't. That was far too fast for someone who didn't want to leave. Almost certainly so. The threat is unknown, but the intelligence briefings don't show that Redrick is involved. I turned my attention back to Nyx as she walked over to me. She wore a black dress that stopped shy of her ankles. The hem was tiered into 3 different layers, with the first being bundled up near the top before dropping into the next tier. Small designs were stitched into the clothing and seemed to drink in the surrounding light like a beggar thirsting for water. Are you ready to go? Yes, Ms. Alessia. She adjusted her bag slightly and smoothed out some wrinkles in her dress. Will you be able to keep everyone here safe? I don't have the manpower to escort this many people to the Praetorian stronghold. I glanced back towards Charon as I reached my hand out for Nyx to take. Yes. With Octavian and Ricard here, I find it very unlikely that the stronghold will fall. His voice sounded far richer within the mental connection than the words that left his skeletal mouth. All right, Nyx. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon, all right? Of course, Mr. Charon. She gave the skeleton a respectful bow, utterly unaware of the conversation that we were having at the moment. All right then. There are still Praetorians in the stronghold. They will do their best to protect you if the walls get breached. Stay safe, old friend. I clenched Nyx's hand as I gave him a nod. I'll catch you around, Charon. Goodbye. Nyx squeaked out as I led her from the classroom. I had troubling thoughts, and if Nyx wasn't here, I would have happily sat here and fought at the side of everyone since I knew the Empress was safe. But alas, it is what it is. As we walked away from the classroom, Nyx grew quiet, and a sad look slowly writhed its way onto her face. What's wrong? I broke the silence between us as we walked through the sprawling halls of the main building. I miss my mother. I haven't seen her outside since she brought me here. She whispered and looked towards the ground. She misses you, too. She has just been really busy the last few days. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze as we pushed on. The sense of urgency wanted to make me move faster, but I had to take it easy, for now at least. There was still no sign of imminent danger. But I still had to be wary. It's not fair. Why does she have to work so much? As she spoke, she kicked the ground and sent a pebble flying across the room, which slammed into one pillar, taking out a small chunk of it. The child was genuinely terrifying. Her potential was almost limitless. Already she was consuming the knowledge that we were all passing on to her. Her skill in magic was blossoming like a rose in the spring, and her blade work was becoming superb. Though she still needed more training if she wanted to become perfect at it. Even her close-range training was coming along smoothly. Though she was still inexperienced, she still had immense strength. There is always work to be done. The Empress has to attend to many things, some of which are all at once. but trust me when I say that she really misses you. But do you want to know a secret? She perked up slightly and twisted her head to meet my gaze. What is the secret, Ms. Alessia? Your mother is very proud of you. She's been watching over you the last few days and sees how strong you are becoming. She often laments about how fast you are growing up. Her eyes widened slightly at my words as she tried to process what I had just said. She watches me? Of course. The Empress keeps an eye on you. Even if you don't see her. She is very proud of you. I squeezed her hand once more as we reached the door that stood guard towards the inside of the headquarters. Dozens of soldiers had already taken position inside the building, ready to give their lives once more to defend if needed. I just wish she was here more, is all. Nick sighed softly, though my words seemed to have the desired effect. Don't worry. Once the project she is working on is finished, she fully intends to spend a lot of time with you. Just a few more days, okay? I glanced toward her, doing my best to keep her spirits high. I feel for the child, but the Empress is only one person. She is doing her best to keep everyone happy. Okay, Ms. Alessia. The little dragon picked her head up a little as the sun touched her skin. With each passing day, the spell that governed her polymorph seemed to become a little better. The scales that had once adorned her flesh had faded slightly and taken a more olive complexion, much like the Empress. Her hair became more silk-like, and its luster increased slightly. It was like she was becoming more human, yet the child's inhuman nature sat just below the surface, begging to be released. I glanced around the courtyard and saw a few non-undead wandering about. The first was the man that I recognized as Gunther. Much to my surprise, he was clad in strange bronze-like armor. His lower half was covered in a strange leather skirt with metal studs that dropped to just above his knees and were matched by greaves of the same bronze-like metal that came up just shy of the skirt. He met my eyes, and I gave him a nod. I hadn't expected to see him here for the crusade. Considering his and Redrick's friendship further reinforced the idea that the outsider wasn't involved in this. But I didn't have time to talk. I needed to get the princess to safety. We snuck out of the compound through a specially made tunnel. I had requested one simply because of my desire to move around the domain unseen and unimpeded, but primarily for moments like this. It led directly to the forest, making it harder for any prying eyes to see us and for troops to move around as needed. I had her pause just outside the tunnel for a moment as I glanced around. The air was eerily quiet, and not even the undead birds seemed to want to talk. The entire thing had me on edge. My eyes quickly scanned the dense foliage of dying bushes, and I saw a few of the dark wraiths that I had positioned around the forest. So far, so good. We were close to the entrance of the Praetorian stronghold. Perhaps a quick 10-minute walk away. Maybe more if we are forced to sneak. Is everything all right, Ms. Alessia? Nick spoke up for once, breaking the silence that hung heavily in the still air. Yes. I mentally sighed as the child broke the silence, though it wasn't her fault. She didn't know what was going on. I gestured for her to follow me as we broke onto a hidden trail and walked through the forest. Everyone has seemed more uptight than usual today. Nyx peeped up once more. I forgot how observant she was becoming. It was going to get harder to hide some things from her. Octavian is leaving tomorrow to lead an operation to take back one of our towns, so we are just preparing if the outsiders decide to make a move. I like him. He seems like a good man. She nodded her head, and if I could breathe, it would have been a sigh of relief. He is. One of the best ones that I know. I replied quietly as we plunged further into the forest. The dark wraiths moved around us like a curtain through the shadows, carefully scouring the area for threats that may lurk in the distance. The outsiders are so different from us. They don't smell like you or mother. She frowned, and her nose crinkled slightly as her lip curled. Well, the outsiders are different. In fact, if anything, your mother has more in common with them than us. We are the dead come back to life. They are those that still live. We pushed on through the forest. My eyes carefully scanned every tree and every dead brush. Is mother not like the rest of you? Well, your mother is as alive as the outsiders. But to her, that means nothing. I replied and thought back to the Empress. Seeing her in my mind caused a sting in my chest that was utterly alien to me. Much like myself, it brought back emotions that had long since died. What does it mean to her, then? Nyx asked again, her budding curiosity seemingly never sated by any response. She loves us all. To her, we are all family. Nyx bobbed her head as she weighed my response. That sounds like mother. She finally spoke up once more after some time. Yes, it does. I quickly scanned the area once more, seeing the dark wraiths grow irate. I didn't even have to think about why. Without a second thought, I pulled Nyx behind me as the death cry of a dark wraith filled the air. All the training I put them through quickly took over, as a few broke from the shadows and quickly swarmed forth in a bid to buy us time to escape. I didn't want to sacrifice them so needlessly, but the princess came first. Alessia, what's going on? I could feel her tense up slightly as the sounds of fighting grew louder. We still had some space between us and the outsiders. We need to run back to the stronghold. While entrances to the underground stronghold all across this area, the closest one was still too far. The sense of urgency that I had grew stronger as I picked up and retreated. Nyx began to protest as the shriek of another dark wraith filled the air. But I ignored her. More of the wraiths that stood nearby quickly broke off and rushed toward whatever was coming towards us. Their numbers were dwindling, but their sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. We were close to the secret entrance. My feet quickly and easily glided across the root and stone-filled ground, making quick time. Nyx's protest grew more fervent, and it took everything that I had to not snap at the child. Another death shriek filled the air, it was even closer this time. Whatever was behind was shredding through my assassins like paper. I pushed myself harder and saw the trees that had marked the location of the underground tunnel. Nyx, I need you to be quiet and listen to me. As the last dark wraith broke away, I set her down and quickly rushed through the forest. My heart ached for those who had fallen, yet I was happy that they were finally getting the rest they deserved. Tell me what's going on. She huffed at me. Tears were starting to fall down her eyes, leaving water trails in their wake. Get back in the tunnel, and run as fast as you can to the stronghold. When you get there, I need you to find one of the officers and tell them that the fog is coming. Okay? I reached out and quickly began to lift the hatch. What do you mean? Alessia, why aren't you coming? She was starting to panic as the hatch lifted. This is a super important mission, okay? Consider it your first one as a princess. But don't worry. I will be back as soon as I can. I grabbed her hand as she stepped onto the first rung. You are going to come back, right? She was on the verge of full-fledged tears. She was scared, she didn't know what was going on, but the less she knew, the better. Of course. I'll be right behind you in just a little bit, okay? I cast a quick glance behind me, and I saw an azure flame rush through the forest, coming directly towards me. Nyx went to reply, but I quickly shut the hatch before she could say anything else, just as the flame reached me. For the first time in a long time, I felt the long-lost sensation of pain as the fire slammed into my back, moving faster than I could react. Captain, here are the reports. I glanced up from my desk and toward the man who spoke to me. A set of hazel-brown eyes that flickered with a gregarious warmth gazed down at me. His face locked in a pleasant grin as he passed a stack of papers. Thank you, Lieutenant Flint. I reached out and took the papers from him. But as I did so, I felt a vague sense of déjà vu. How many times have I done this? Are you feeling all right, Captain? He grabbed a chair and pulled it over to us, and sat down. I suppose so. I've been having the strangest of dreams lately. My thoughts were going slightly haywire, and it was something that was occurring more and more. Perhaps they aren't dreams, Captain. He stared at me and flashed his pointed teeth in an almost feral grin. The haze that clouded my vision flickered as he spoke, and a skull overlaid half of Aaron's face. At first, horror dawned on me as I gazed at the face of an undead, but just as quickly as it came, it slowly vanished, only to be replaced by a sense of cold emptiness that drowned out all sense of emotion. What is going on, Flint? I brought my hands up to my face and gazed at them. One hand was askew and covered in graying and decrepit flesh that oozed rivets of pus, some of which had long since sloughed off, revealing the snow-white bone underneath. The other looked as normal as could be, matched by a uniform that was as pristine as humanly possible. Nothing, Captain. Everything is as it should be. He flashed me another grin, reached out, and gave me a pat on my shoulder. Then, he stood up without another word, leaving me alone with my thoughts. But the thoughts never seemed to linger long. Just like the constant cycle of the tide, they were swept away by the fog that coiled itself around me. I stood up from my desk, barely paying attention to the stack of papers built up on the side of my desk. What was I doing again? I pried through my thoughts until I finally settled on patrolling the stronghold. I walked out of the makeshift war room and quietly strolled along the well-trodden paths. All around me, the loyal warriors of Asteria were busy training and finalizing the construction that the Empress had ordered. That was good. We needed to be ready. The skirmishing on the border has only increased intensity, which worries me. We could be under attack any day now, and it was my job to hold the line. If this stronghold broke, then the entire southern portion of the empire would be ripe for raiding, and that was something that I would not allow. I strode further through the stronghold, ignoring the slow, crushing weight of mental exhaustion that was trying to consume me. I was tired, and I wanted to sleep, yet I couldn't. Not yet. I bumped into something as I was walking, consumed by my own thoughts. Tentatively, I glanced around, yet there was nothing in front of me. How odd. I took another step forward, and I felt my garments getting tugged. I froze and glanced around again, but a voice assaulted my ears. Please, Alessia, coming. It was the voice of a child. One that I recognized. The fog that swirled around my vision ebbed and flowed as it slowly receded, revealing the stronghold in all its damaged glory. My eyes were drawn to the little girl that stood before me, at waist height. Her hair was as dark as the feathers of a raven, and her flesh was dark, almost like a tan, with a faint silvery hue. But her face reminded me of someone. Who was it again? The image hung in my mind, teasing me as I tried to connect it to something. Please. Alessia needs help. She stayed behind. There were small trails of tears that were pouring down her face. At the mention of Alessia, I dropped to a knee and reached my hand out. We all knew who Alessia was. She was the right hand of our empress. A figure well-renowned and loved by all. Quick, tell me. Where is she? A sense of urgency bit at my ankles as I tried to pry the information from the child. She sniveled and wiped away some snot that had gathered around her nose. She said the fog is coming. At her words, the fog flickered, and a pulse cleared my vision. The haze that had clouded my mind for so long vanished, and information rushed into my mind like a tidal wave, filling the void left behind. I knew who she was, I knew who she looked like and what had happened here. Everything was as clear as day now. Those words, I knew what they were. I stood up and placed my hand on her shoulder. Someone, get the princess to the stronghold. Alert the troops, there are invaders outside the gate. She stared up at me as a few of my soldiers rushed over as I started to dish orders out without hesitation. The princess could only gaze at me as the soldiers guided her away, shouting at me to help Alessia. The bells tolled around the stronghold not even a few seconds later. The deep sound filled the air with a baleful moan as metal struck metal, and the stronghold came to life once more as orders that had been issued ages ago went into effect. Troops rushed around me like water, rushing towards predetermined positions. Archers rushed up ladders with their bows in hand and arrows at the ready. Swordsmen lined the wall right behind them, ready to assail anyone who thought it best to climb the battlement. A few squads positioned themselves around the gate and other vital places, ready to intercept anything that breached our vaunted walls. A squad of strange humanoid snake-like creatures approached me, and each stood taller than a man and was clad in the armor of polished black stone arrayed in a panoply of scales. Each armor set rose past their neck and rested just under their jaw, and extended the same in the opposite direction, just past their groin, giving the impression of wearing a stone skirt. What's going on? The lead one had scales the color of freshly fallen dawn that glimmered in the midday sun. We are about to be attacked. If you want to help, feel free to do so, otherwise, stay out of our way. I placed my good hand on the hilt of my sword. However, my words came out as mere groans, which infuriated the strange snake man. However, just as he was about to retort, a large man appeared from the headquarters. His sheer size dwarfed everyone around. His eyes burning with the rage of a freshly born star. Ricard, what the hell is going on? If I was still alive, my heart would have skipped a beat as I regarded the man before me. It was the War Master. The demon of Asteria. The breaker of Alethar. I dropped to my knees and crossed my right hand over my heart. War Master, forgive me. The princess came bearing a message. She informed us that the fog was coming. The fire in his eyes faded slightly as a look of recognition danced across his face. I understand. Rise now, Ricard. He stepped back and affixed his gaze to the gathering of all the non-Asterians and gave them a nod. It appears that we are under attack. Considering that this is from the outsiders, we will handle this unless you want to join. We will sit this one out then. We don't wish to start an incident. The lead one nodded his head and flicked his forked tongue before turning away with the rest of his platoon. I gazed at them and narrowed my eyes. Mercenaries were the worst sort. No honor, no loyalty, outside of who pays them the most. The only one who didn't wore the attire of a professional soldier. His hair was shaved, and his face was wizened with the passage of time and the harsh reality of battle. A man worthy of respect. Where is the princess then, Captain? He turned his fearsome gaze back towards me. I sent her to the inner sanctum. She should be safe there. I rose back to my feet, still feeling entirely unworthy of being in this man's presence. Good. What of Alessia? Was she not with the child? Octavian crossed his arms. The sheer amount of muscle underneath pulled his grey combat slacks taut. No. The princess said that she stayed behind. Blasted woman. Of course, she would. He growled as he spun around. Do you know where the princess came from? No, sir. I was still in a haze when she arrived. I felt a tiny flicker of shame light in my chest. A mere candle compared to the endless void deep within my chest. I was trapped in that fog for so long, and now I'm awake. Be that as it may. Once we deflect the assault on the stronghold, then we will go find her. Until then, we will remain here. Our priority will be the princess. As cold as it sounded, it was true. Alessia would prefer it that way. This stronghold has always been my charge, War Master. I will defend it in death as I have in life. As the words left my mouth, the severity of what had passed, and what was to come hung heavily on me. Sir, the War Master wants me to report to you that all of our communication lines are down. We are on our own. The warrant officer cracked off a sharp salute. His sword dangled from his hip, and his uniform was as in good condition as it could possibly be. Well, that was unfortunate. But we will hold. Have we dispatched carrier pigeons, then? Yes, sir. They are on their way to every relevant outpost, as well as to the Praetorian stronghold. Any word on Alessia? I spun around and gazed out across the courtyard. My hands were firmly clasped behind my back as I took stock of the situation. No. But the scouts have reported heavy fighting in the northern woods. She must be giving them hell. I weighed his words and mentally scowled. I wouldn't send any troops to aid her. I have a vow to defend the stronghold, no matter the cost. Even if that means I need to sacrifice somebody. Duty above all else. I'm sure Alessia would understand. You are dismissed, Electroc. The sound of his uniform rustling as he snapped off his salute filled the room before the sound of striking bone stone filled the room as he wandered off. I stood there for a moment before I decided that it was time to join my troops. I stared out across the courtyard, lost in a sea of my own thoughts. I've done this before, haven't I? I stood in there, fending off a wave of attackers. I stood at the front, standing shoulder to shoulder with all my troops. The memory swirled around, clouding my view for a moment before I cast them to the side. Now was not the time to get lost. No, I had to defend this stronghold. I had to defend the princess. Even if I must give my life. Sir, we have reports of movement just outside of the wall. Towards the gate. Another warrant officer came up behind me and rattled off his report. Good. Let them come. I placed my hand on the hilt of my sword. Octavian has graciously allowed me to handle the entire defense, and I will not let him down. Whoever it may be, they will only meet my blade. The ground trembled, and loose stone rolled from the wall. But we all remained firm. Instead of fracturing and fighting as our squads, we will face this threat as one. We will be unified in the face of this threat. As one, the archers on the wall released a flurry of arrows. The sound of dozens upon dozens of strings twanging filled the air. Energy started to fill the air as mages cast their volley. Report? My good hand rested gently on the hilt of my sword, ready to bring it to bear at a second's notice. We have counted 4 parties of 4 each near the front of the gate. Each of them seems to be specialized in some sort of nature magic and are accompanied by some large walking trees. One scout shouted through the ranks of the legion. I took a step forward and spun around to face my legion. At its helm was my most trusted lieutenant. His brown eyes, once filled to the brim with joy, were replaced by a dark chasm that seemed to drink in all the light. Bones that had been withered by the ceaseless toll of time replaced his once lithe form. My heart broke as I regarded my legion. Once radiant colors and armor, now faded and sullied. As many of you may know, I'm not a fan of speeches. But hear this. Today, we defend the southern pass of Asteria. We don't know from what, but that doesn't matter. We once defended this pass in life, and now, we will do it in death. But not only do we defend this pass, but we defend the princess. Do not falter, and we will win this day. The legion rippled as they cheered. They knew what was at stake, and they would happily give their life to the empress and her daughter. Now that they have revealed themselves, we will march out to them. We will not let them lay a single foot inside the vaunted grounds of our stronghold. We will crush them before they could even consider it. Once more, my legion cheered as the sounds of another volley of arrows and magic was let loose. We could sit inside these walls and hammer away at them. But we will take the fight to them. With Octavian residing over the Second Legion, that will remain inside. At least until the Praetorians arrive to help. Open the gates. My voice boomed out across the lines, and the 2 soldiers that operated the gate slowly pushed it open, revealing the plains that lie just outside. Beyond that was a grouping of a few large tree-like monsters withering the arrows. First Legion. Move forward. I grit my teeth as the Legion moved forward to meet the threat with me in the front, just like the last time. So the accursed come to meet their fate. A man clad in wood adorned with streaks of gold stepped forward from the tree line. His face was adorned with a helm with a set of wooden horns that stretched out from the top and reached for the sky. You trespassed upon Asteria, and you have rejected the treaties that have governed our interactions. You will find your absolution on the edge of my blade. Without an extra word, my legion rushed forward to meet those that would defile our lands. For Velcrest! The frontman yelled, and the lumbering tree monsters rushed forward from the forest line. Another volley of arrows tore from the walls and slammed into the ground. A vast majority missed, but those that didn't punctured the wood that made up the monsters. A volley of various forms of magic tore through the air, leaving trails as they ventured forth. Magical barriers were erected at a moment's notice, shrugging away a vast part of the damage. For Asteria, as one, my legion fractured into smaller portions as they surged forth like a vengeful tide and crashed into the small party of the outsiders. With a dull roar, the giant trees took a lumbering step and swung their giant root-like arms, cutting through a few of my unlucky soldiers. Mages, focus down the trees. Warriors, on me! I belted out orders and drew my sword. With a flick of my wrist, I pointed the blade towards the sky, brought the hilt to my lips, and gave it a kiss before I flourished it once more. My soldiers listened to my orders without question and quickly organized themselves. Gouts of fire and darkness rushed forward at close range as spells were slung without hesitation. Chaos quickly spread across the battleground, yet I marched on. I completely trusted my troops. They knew what had to be done. The ground trembled as the gigantic creatures lumbered their way across it, swinging their arms in rhythmic motions of death, trying to cut my troops down like chaff. From the forest line, a bunch of smaller humanoid trees broke through. Their wooden faces locked in a rictus of agony as they ran. The ground beneath them was twisted and churned as their roots attempted to bog them down. The first one covered the ground faster than I thought and ran straight towards me. It swung a hand filled with gnarled branches towards my face. With but a flick of my wrist, I severed its hand before bringing my blade back through the rest of its body. Do not give in. Do not yield. Defend the motherland. Defend the princess. My words rolled from my tongue as I pushed forward. The surrounding darkness ebbed and flowed, tainting the already dead ground with its presence. It clung to my blade like a long-lost lover and dripped from it like the thickest of ambrosia. Each swing of my blade marked the end of all those that stood before me. My movements, though rough, still had the years of muscle memory that I had built. A gregarious laugh filled the air, drowning out even the roars of the trees, followed shortly by the cracking of wood. Flint must be having fun. Good. Make them pay. I locked eyes with the man who had given me his speech. His face was obscured by his helm. He held a long slender sword that was crafted with inhuman perfection. Its hilt clad in the finest of golds, yet it seemed to thirst for more. You are an abomination of nature. I will purge you from this world. He yelled, yet the sounds of death that filled the air drowned his voice out. Do you think I chose this? I yelled back, though I knew he couldn't understand me. Do you think I want this? I punctuated my words by cutting down another monster that tried to block my path. I detest living like this. I blocked a wild swing and stepped to the side. The surrounding darkness formed dozens of small balls that shot out like a cannon towards the tree, tearing through its bark like wet paper. I hated this. I hated knowing what I was. But I couldn't stop, and I couldn't give in. Not yet. I gritted my teeth and finally came close to the strange man. Worry not, foul undead. I'll purge you, and then that wretched abomination that you call an empress. At his words, a spark lit in my chest that quickly turned into an unbearable conflagration. You will do no such thing. I launched forward, the tip of my blade aiming towards his throat. In a flash of light, my sword was blocked, and a clean strike punctured through my chest plate. I disengaged, tearing the sword free with a meaty sound. You taint this world and deny its natural order. Your very presence is a blight on nature. He flicked his blade free of my dried, coagulated blood. Long vine-like tendrils rose from the ground around him and quickly traveled towards me. I cut through the first and second one, but the third broke my guard and smashed into my chest plate, sending me through the air. My vision spun as I was launched like a rag doll. But it will take a lot more than that to stop me. I forced my body to stand and flourished my blade once more. None of us chose this life. We raged against it, yet it still came for us. I spat at the man and lunged once more. My good hand lacked strength, yet I fought on. I've already died once, I'm not afraid of it. We traded blow after blow, yet I was pushed back. My body was broken, it was corrupted. It lacked the strength that I once had. But above all else, there was a sense of soul-crushing exhaustion. No, this was far more than that. This was the weight of ennui. I was dead, yet I was brought back. My soul yearned for its rest. The only thing that kept me going was duty. Duty to Asteria, and duty to my empress. I pushed on, growing more aware that my body was crumbling. At least until a vine pierced my stomach and threw me to the ground. My vision faded as darkness overtook me. For the first time, I could feel the biting cold as it spread from my limbs. My mind welcomed it. I was so tired. I wanted to rest. Please. Just let me die. The more delicate emotions that had long since died rose like a crashing crescendo in my chest. I could feel it. My limbs ached and my muscles screamed. My mind was weary of living far past my time. It all pressed into me. My soul begged for me to just let go. But I couldn't. Not yet. I would not embrace the great sleep just yet. The coldness that had spread met the conflagration roared in my chest as I focused on my sense of purpose. The inferno roared even harder as something within me broke. Fire rushed through me like a tsunami as I opened my eyes and stared into the sky. The sun had faded from the warm yellow into a harsh, sanguine red. Lightning split the sky like the claws of an angry god. A sense of anger welled within my chest as I reached up and gripped the vine that impaled me to the ground. Darkness rushed from my hands, quickly withering it away. They will all pay. I rolled onto my stomach and placed my good hand against my broken arm, and with a single smooth motion, I forced it back into place. Darkness drenched the ground as I stood up and grabbed my sword with my dominant arm. The man that had done this was but a few meters away battling Eren. The two were close to being evenly matched, with Eren throwing out stone-shattering punches and kicks, yet it was clear that if the battle went on any longer, he would lose. A low growl escaped from my lips as the anger twisted and churned inside of me, causing the man to spin around. Eren. He's mine. I flicked my wrist, and darkness shot out in a crescent. Quickly the man dodged, but just barely. The scything arc shot past him and dug a meter into the ground. How dare they come into my home? How dare they violate what I hold dear? Thoughts that were not my own seeped in like poison as I raged. I lurched forward and smashed into the man before me. My sword quickly smashed his aside, and I delivered a backhand that sent him flying in one direction, with his helm going in the other. He hit the ground with a thud and rolled back to his feet. He gazed at me with such disdain it was palpable. A thin trickle of blood ran down his face, mixing with the sweat that ran freely from him. Impossible. I killed you. I will not die. Not until you pay for what you have done. I stepped forward in a flash and swung my blade in a deadly arc. Now we begin our dance once more. He parried it as he stepped back, clearly worried about how easily the tides had changed. I don't understand. He hissed as he blocked another flurry of blows. Why won't you die? Because I fight for the Empress. I will not turn my back on the vows that I made. I pressed on, dancing around his guard, landing blow after blow. My strength returning to me, the strength that I once had in life, flowed through my veins. Yet, it also ate away at me. Why? She is nothing more than a foul necromancer. The man hissed through his teeth as we exchanged more blows, yet he slowed down. She is no such thing. She is our guiding light. Our light at the end of the tunnel. I pushed on, slipped through his guard, and plunged my sword deep into the man's chest. The shadows rushed from my blade and seeped through his flesh, spreading its corrupting touch. The man gasped as my blade pierced him. This doesn't make sense. His words grew weaker as his hands scrambled against my face and clawed against me. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faint sensation of flesh against my own. Rest now. Perhaps you will find the answers you seek. I pushed him off of my blade and watched as he fell back. His struggles weakened as his amber eyes faded into the lifeless blue of the recently deceased. Flint, I called out, fighting the urge to fall over. Captain. His voice sounded in my ear, yet it felt like my vision was slowly fading. How goes the battle? I felt my knees buckle as I fell to the side, only to be caught by him. The squads are still fighting. Though it seems you have killed the strongest of them. I felt my head list to the side, and I saw Eren. Half of his face was locked in the face I have always known. A man filled to the brim with self-confidence. One who loved to fight and my best friend. The other half was what we had become. The very thing that we fought against. Good. I choked out. Twinges of white fiery agony danced across my flesh, something that I had long since forgotten. Exhaustion seeped in, threatening to drag me under once more. Captain? He lowered me gently, his face flickering in and out, bouncing between undead and life. Though the meaning was lost on me now. I reached up and gave him a pat on his shoulder. The very act of speaking was growing more difficult with each passing second. This is just like déjà vu, huh? It only seems like yesterday that we were in this same position. Memories drifted listlessly through my mind, yet they seemed to have ended just like this one did. Don't die on me, Captain. We need you. His face neared mine, and I stared at it as I felt my body normalize. Feeling course through me, I felt a strange pump in my chest. Though in my last few moments, everything made sense. At the very moment that death claimed us, we were the most alive. Thank you, Aaron. I tried to give him a smile. I felt my grip slacken as my eyes drifted to the sky. I still fought as I lay there. I couldn't die. Not yet. I still had a job to do. My body refused to listen to me as I stared into the blood-red sky. I can't go like this. Oh, Captain. A feminine voice danced around my mind. One filled with sadness. One that I recognized. The clouds twisted and churned in the sky as the surrounding light fell away, leaving me adrift in a void. The clouds coalesced into a mask. A mask that I recognized. Lines twisted and swirled around, forming impossible geometric shapes that seemed to stretch into eternity. Behind it was two brilliant emerald eyes that raged with power. Empress. I felt my sinus throb as power assailed my senses. My mind struggled to understand precisely what I was seeing. Oh, my sweet child. The mask grew nearer, and I felt a hand caress my face, much like a mother would. It pains me to see you like this. As her hand brushed my face, I felt all the pain fall away. The exhaustion that had hounded me vanished. All that I could feel was serenity and peace. Yet, I clung to the duty that was prescribed to me. Please, Empress. I can't die here. I need to keep going. Not yet. I haven't done enough yet. For the first time in a long time. I wept. I wept as I stared at my Empress. No, not just my Empress. I was staring at my goddess. You have given so much to me. You have earned your rest, Captain Ricard. Her voice hammered into my soul, luring me in. I can do more. Please let me. I begged as I wept. I can't give in. Yet here I was, laying in the void, my soul aching for its long-earned rest, yet my mind commanding me to carry out my duty. Oh, how fate could be so cruel. Relax, child. You are safe here. She cooed at me as I felt spectral hands run across my face. Please. I need to stay. My words became whispers as I tried to find the strength to resist. Her words gently prodded me, weeded their way into my soul, and dragged me further into her loving embrace. Emerald Fire regarded me with a thoughtful gaze for an eternity. But as her warm words were about to seep into my soul, she paused. A feeling of rage pulsed across the air and chased away whatever love and warmth had settled in my chest. I felt a large spectral hand grab me and drag me up and away, just as a strange violet miasma spread across the ground. The surrounding ground twisted as I rose, yet I was panicking. I had no clue what was going on, nor did I know what the source of that rage was coming from. But the hand was like an angel and was rescuing me from the grasp of what was to come. Do you feel that, Captain? She asked as I spun around slowly to regard the battlefield below. My troops were dying, getting cut down by the tree-like monsters. But we're still winning. Though at this moment, it felt like everyone was caught in a state of duality. Faces of flesh and blood sat on bone, decaying skin, and etheric muscle in a perverted display of life. It was horror incarnate, yet now that I was like this, I finally understood. We were dead, yet we were alive. Magic no longer bound us and enslaved us to a will. We were free. We were reborn. However, just as the epiphany struck, I felt rage gnaw away at the corner of my mind. The thin veil of miasma that threatened to consume me earlier spread across the ground like a stream. The wounded soldiers on the ground were quickly granted mercy, and tiny sparks of gold would erupt from their chests in a muted light storm that floated softly into the sky. Pressure built in my face, as my sinus throbbed, as the pressure moved in even faster. The rage attacked my mind, threatening to shatter it, as I could only gaze down on the battlefield, paralyzed by the emotions striking me relentlessly. Rage, anger, shame, and confusion hammered into me, one after another. But one was the most prevalent above all else. The anger of a mother. With a clap like thunder that chased away the muted silence, a form appeared in the middle of the battle. She was encased in a brilliant golden light that spilled off her in a relentless torrent and chased away the coming darkness of the setting sun. The miasma spread across the ground, slithered its way towards her, and intermingled with the radiant light pouring off her. Her eyes blazed like a conflagration, and small gouts of orange lightning sparked and jumped down her arms and legs. Even the mask that she wore wasn't immune to the power that was radiating off of her. The orange flickered and churned and the purple pulsed with an unnatural life. But the scariest part was how the light and miasma mixed in the air behind her. Fog and light mixed and intermingled, forming the outline of a giant scaled beast that echoed the rage that she felt. "Empress?" I murmured as the realization struck me like a hammer as memories that had long since faded away slammed into me. Since I've known her, I've never seen her angry. "Where is my daughter?" Key slammed into the ground sending dirt flying high into the air, and the world seemed to pause. Her words were like a sledgehammer as they slammed into man and undead alike. Power thrashed and swam through the air, freezing everything under its sheer weight. Even the wind held its breath, afraid to insult the power that bound it. At least until the groan of wood shifting filled the air as one of the enormous beasts stood against it. Dozens of branches swayed in the still air as it clambered forth to meet this new threat. I struggled against the incorporeal chains that had wrapped around my body. "I need to go. I have to protect the Empress." "No. Just watch." Her words soothed the raging fire within my soul as I watched on helplessly. The giant ant lumbered forth and swung its giant many-branched limbs, and time seemed to slow down as it raced through the air and towards my Empress. I begged and pleaded to be released so I could protect her, yet all that answered was silence. In the blink of an eye, she vanished just as the tree slammed into where she stood. Dirt and stone choked out the air as the tree swung its arm and tore through the ground. She appeared a short distance away, with a single white light in front of her mask. Mote by mote, light swirled around and coalesced until the energy radiating from her face grew with painful intensity. Her eyes blazed in anger as more emotions assailed me. Yet I could only watch on helplessly. I needed to do more than just sit here. The giant tree reared back its arm and slowly charged toward my leader. The earth shook under its sheer weight as each foot slammed into the ground. But the energy grew stronger. I felt something tug painfully at my soul. It was like claws digging into its etheric flesh, yanking me forward. But the hand that bound me pulled me away. The sparks, however, that had yet to rise above the battle were not so lucky. They were dragged screaming through the air and into the swirling maelstrom of energy forming in front of the Empress mask. The ant crossed the distance quickly, ready to smash the woman to the ground. At least until a primal roar filled the air as she let the maelstrom loose. The white energy exploded outwards in a cone that extended as far as the eye could see. It cut through the top half of the monster, disintegrating it in a sea of searing white light. The roar grew in intensity as she swung her head, and the light followed like a hapless slave, cutting through ground and tree alike. A few more large tree-like creatures were cut down as the beam traveled before suddenly being cut short. "I won't ask again. Where the fuck is my daughter?" Her words were akin to a heavy growl as she stood in the middle of the chaos. She felt like an entirely different person at that moment. A far cry from the woman that I knew. "Hell hath no fury like a mother's wrath." The divine being behind me spoke, tearing my gaze away from the chaos below me. I've never seen her so angry. My words felt so weak against the power that thrashed in the air, making me feel as if I were the size of an ant. "I'm angry because they threatened my daughter. That I will not stand for. An attack on her is an attack on me." The words that carried the response were still full of love and warmth, yet they still carried a sharp edge. I floated there, trapped in the void. Reality was often cruel, yet I knew why it was so. We all had our jobs to do. Each of us was important in our own way, so I didn't fault her for acting the way she did. Her job begged it, just like mine called for my death. It was the way of things. I need to return now. I can't stay here. My mind was made up after watching everything unfold beneath me. I had to get back to my duty, no matter how tired I may be. If you go back, you will not be awakened. You will be the same mindless being you once were. Nothing but a slave to the past. However, if you remain, you will stay as you are now. If you so desire, I will create a specter for you. Nothing more than a shadow of what you once were, to do the duty prescribed. Her words rolled across me like a warm tide that gently lapped at my soul. It felt like an impossible choice. Both sounded like double-edged swords. One where I was chained to the past, whereas in the other, I could rest, yet I couldn't interact with the world. I weighed the choices carefully as I thought through everything. Yet, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was shocked when I got that letter from the carrier pigeon. At first, I didn't know why Karen had done it, but I realized as I read the note. Nyx was in danger, and he couldn't reach me any other way. Even my teleport function was disabled if I attempted to get into combat. So I ran. I ran as fast as possible to get to the stronghold and to Nyx. But here I was, standing in the middle of a now paused battle. Many of my soldiers are lying dead. Many of those who had dared to attack this place suffered the same fate. All that was left were a few handfuls of survivors trying to fight against my legion. But they would fall, and there would be no escape. There can be no mercy for you if you threaten my daughter. I won't ask again. Where the fuck is my daughter? The rage that coursed through my veins was like an all-consuming fire. Not even the exhaustion from using my soul shout could quench it. Not even the fear that I felt from that ent could smother it. No, I was angry. So very angry, yet I was still scared. Scared that something had happened to her. Everyone stood around me, frozen like statues, undead and living alike. I didn't know who these people were, but I didn't care. They violated the treaty that we had in play at this moment. I will have a long talk with Redrick as soon as this is all resolved. For Velcrest. A man raised a golden sword high into the air, and the remaining men all cheered in unison before they gave one last charge to my troops. Ah, so Velcrest was behind this then. They were making moves faster than I thought they would. But it wouldn't matter. They will die here. However, before I could retort, all the remaining of the legion gathered around me. Dozens of soldiers bore their weapons, and Aaron sat at the front. His armor broke in various places, and his gloves were haggard and falling apart. The two sides clashed one last time. With many tree-like monsters falling a few quick seconds before, the fight was now more in my legion's favor. But I didn't have time to take part. No, I needed to get to Nyx. Quickly, I broke away from the fight and ran in the stronghold's direction. The stronghold wasn't breached from the look of things, so she must be in there. Quick step after quick step, I covered the distance in seconds. Ignoring the pain that ate away at my legs and chest. I've covered well over 3 kilometers in a few minutes, but I couldn't rest. Not until I found Nyx. I quickly scaled the wall and threw myself over it, drawing a few gazes from the soldiers arrayed around the wall. I could feel hundreds of gazes as they burned into my back, but I ignored them. I landed and dashed through the stronghold. The world around me was but a blur as I moved through, my eyes set on only one area. Not even a split second after I reached the doors that lead into the central HQ. I pushed through them and entered the main lobby. Dozens of soldiers were standing here. Swords and spears were drawn and pointed towards the door. Zombies and skeletons alike were shoulder to shoulder, with shields up, as they stood guarding the door. I activated a chain of quick steps, quickly vaulted over their lines, and hurried down the hall without pausing. Stationed at every central hall or intersection was another batch of troops, ready to defend whatever lay behind them. But I didn't stop. Barely even sparing them a glance, I kept running down the halls. With each passing second, the troops that guarded here grew thicker and more experienced, until finally, I came across my honor guard as they filled the hallway that led to the classroom. Hoplites stood at the ready with their spears pointed down the hallway. Their shields interlocked, radiating light golden energy. The few battle mages that were here stood just behind them, with magic dancing across the tips of their fingers. Blade masters stood positioned around, ready to intercept whatever threat may come. I slowed down just as the giant double door came into view, with the last bit of my guard that was here stationed right in front of it. My heart thrummed in my chest as I picked up my pace once more, as I rushed over to it. The two that stood at the guard here saw me and opened the door. I pushed past them and into the classroom and glanced around, fearing the worst. In the middle stood Karen. His violin in hand, just behind him, was a bunch of other undead, and at the front of it, all was Nyx, who saw on the floor. Her legs brought up to her chest. Nyx. Relief broke through the anger coursed through me, and I rushed over to my daughter. Her head shot up as soon as I said her name. Tears streamed down her face, and her eyes looked a little bloodshot. Seeing her like this broke my heart just a little. Mother. She jumped up and rushed over to me, tackling me in a hug. I knew you would come. She squeezed me tightly and dug her head into my stomach. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I bombarded her with questions as I broke away from the hug and squatted down to quickly look her over, checking to ensure she wasn't hurt. She shook her head, wiping away some tears that had formed in the corner of her eyes. I'm okay, Mother. A sigh of relief left my mouth as I threw my arms around her and pulled her back into me. I clung to her, terrified that something else would happen if I let her go. I was so scared. She wrapped her arms around my neck, and we sat like that for a little bit. Her presence did wonders to calm the anger that I still felt simmering just below the surface. Did I do good, Mother? She sniffled slightly as she pulled away from me. You did wonderfully. I gave her an encouraging smile as I ran my fingers through her hair before bringing it to rest on her cheek as I wiped away most of the tears that were spilling from her face. Alessia told me that it was my first job as the princess to let everyone know that the fog was coming. But I was so scared. She sniffled again as I froze. Just like before, I felt my blood run cold. Where is Alessia? My eyes quickly glanced around the room, looking for her. Now that I was calmer, I realized she wasn't there. She stayed behind. She told me to get here and tell everybody. But she said she would be right behind me. But she never came. She wiped away more tears that threatened to pour down her face. But my heart dropped. No, 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 no. Alessia, why would you do that? I wrapped my arms around Nyx one last time and held her close. I'm gonna go get Alessia, okay? Can you tell me where she was last? I fought desperately to contain the white fiery rage that reignited in my chest. The northern path. In the forest. She murmured in my chest as she clung to me, her hands constantly squeezing me. Okay. I'm gonna go now. Alright, and I'll bring Alessia back when I return. I pulled away from her and my fingers through her raven-colored hair, trying to reassure her. Please come back. Her emerald eyes gazed up at me with fear and sadness, further breaking my heart. I promise I will. I pulled her close and gave her a kiss on the forehead before standing up. Karen, I want Redrick here. Now. My words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't help it. Of course, mistress. He replied, but I was already moving out of the classroom with my eyes locked on the map. I really hope I got there in time. I quick-stepped all the way to the northern forest. My muscles screamed at me, and exhaustion was quick on my heels. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not until I knew Alessia was safe. All around me, trees were cut down and destroyed. Azure flames lapped at destroyed trees, and the air was heavy with the stench of fire and blood. My heart pounded in fear and anger as I pushed further into the woods. A few bodies lay strewn about, cut in half, in pools of freshly spilled blood that had yet to be absorbed by the ground. A few ant-like creatures lay shattered and strewn about in dozens of pieces. The sound of fighting grew closer as I ran through the forest. I burst through some foliage and fell into a small clearing. Alessia was there dancing through a small group of the same soldiers from earlier and some ents and what looked to be dryads. Her white hair was wild in the wind. Her clothes were tattered and burnt. The weapon I crafted for her was chipped and slick with fresh blood and shattered wood. But the thing that broke my heart more than anything else was how low her health bar was. I felt the rage in my chest explode into an outright storm. How dare they hurt what belongs to me? No one paid me any attention as I stood there. Alessia was desperately fighting for her life. Each swing of her polearm was as fast as quicksilver and struck with unerring accuracy, inflicting severe damage upon the man she was fighting. But with each attack she landed, two more struck her from behind. She was dancing around everyone, yet she couldn't keep up with the sheer number of strikes that were coming her way. My blood boiled, and rage coursed through my veins. How dare they? A low growl escaped my lips as I felt my claws quickly come into existence. Without thinking, I lunged forward, covering the distance between us with ease, and struck the man just behind Alessia, who was raising his blade. My claws easily parted through armor and flesh, and with a quick twist, I pulled them across the width of his body. Blood splattered the ground, followed by the pungent scent of iron, as the man collapsed. All the fighting ceased, and Alessia spun around to meet me. Her golden eyes were wide in shock. Empress. Her words were airy and seemed forced. I flicked my wrist, and I flung the life force that had adorned my fingertips off and onto the fallen man. I suppose I should feel empty and sad at killing, but I couldn't find it. All that I felt now was anger and vindication. They did this to themselves. You come into my home. You slaughter my people. You threaten my daughter, and you attack my chosen. The words that left my lips were harsh and angry, punctuated by a low growl. You are all fools if you think I would tolerate it. The smell of iron stifled everything else and fanned the flames of wrath in my chest. Ah, so the necromancer makes her appearance. The leader stepped forward and bore his blade towards me. Like the others, his armor was pitted and formed more of metal than wood. It was polished to a painfully golden radiance and had vines chiseled into its surface, interlaced in strange patterns that stretched the entirety of his gear. I am no necromancer. As I spoke, Alessia vanished from sight before reappearing right next to me. Up close, I could see that her clothing was broken and tattered. She was covered in countless cuts and gashes, and a strange blue substance ebbed from her in a steady flow. A domain filled with the undead is but a disease upon nature. You can be nothing but a necromancer. He pointed his blade towards me and gritted his teeth. His face twisted into a sneer as he regarded me with amber eyes. The other two quickly formed up around him, bearing their own weapons. The remaining tree-like creatures rallied around them, which wasn't a lot. Two smaller ones, no larger than myself, and one that stood 2 heads taller than the group across from me. These are my people. You have no right to decide if they get to live or die. But if you are so sure of it, you are welcome to try. A familiar sense of my dream self came to the surface and settled in. But I didn't fight it. No, I welcomed it. It was who I am. It was who they needed. Then you will die with them. He lunged forward to strike me with a straight jab. Time seemed to slow down as my mind worked in overdrive. I stepped forward and deflected the tip of the blade with my claws, and Alessia quickly followed through with a counter-strike with her own weapon. Chaos followed suit as the others joined the fray, and Alessia and I quickly went on the defensive. Thankfully, before I even moved to get to Nyx, I bit into the EXP bank I had and ballooned my overall stats. I jumped to level 32, from where I stood prior, and dumped stats into all my vital traits, not to mention a few points into dexterity, simply to help my mind catch up to my body's movement. It was sudden, but I needed everything that I could get to Nyx, and now I was using it to its full potential to rescue Alessia. I lamented the loss of time, since I still wanted to stack my proficiencies, but luckily I didn't hit my milestone yet. All that mattered was that Nyx and Alessia were safe. My body twisted and turned with liquid grace as I dodged the various swords swung at me, with my claws deflecting what couldn't be dodged. The feeling of power that pumped through me matched the fire that roared in my chest as I settled in the new emotion that had come. I was confident. I was sure of myself. Within me sat a power that very few could match. I cycled ki through my body as I pushed back against the onslaught. I stepped forward, deflected the next strike of the sword, filled my fist full of ki, and delivered a straight jab to the man's face. My arrival thankfully made things easier on Alessia, and she made quick work of the others. Already the remaining monsters were cut down, and she was fighting the last 2 warriors from Velcrest. I wasn't the same woman I was a few months ago when I faced those assassins. I wasn't weak, and I was tired of pretending to be so. This was my home, and they violated it. With the space I created, I picked up a sword from a fallen man and pointed it toward the person I was fighting. Surrender, or you will die here. Blood trailed from his nose, and his amber eyes were filled with uncertainty. No, I can't die here. He straightened himself out and charged once more. This time, he used more magic. Vines broke from the ground and rushed toward me like bullets. Months of constant training kicked in as my feet took their own path. I danced through the onslaught of plants and neatly cut through them, yet even with all my speed, a few still hit their mark. But they hardly drew blood through the scales of my dragon flesh. Wave after wave of vines rushed towards me like hounds, yet I pushed on. Nothing would sway me from my path. 3 more vines sprouted from the ground and wrapped around each other, forming a drill-like head that honed in on my location. A laugh escaped from my lips as it tore through dirt and stone alike in its path to reach me. I quickly stepped forward, dodging its strike, and came face to face with the man I assumed to be the leader. The one who caused this all. He swung his sword out towards me, and I parried it. My body reacted on its own as I blocked another strike of his sword and reached out with my claw, enshrining it with soul fire. He tried to bring his sword to bear, but I dropped my own and caught his hand. The tips of my fingers wrapped around his face and hoisted him into the air. His weight was little more than a mere annoyance to me. You had a chance to live. But you threw it away. I would have forgiven the attack on my soldiers. But you laid your filthy hands on my chosen, and I can't forgive that. He scratched at my hands, trying to free himself. Vines slithered up my legs, and I heard more coming from behind me. Without hesitation, I let my soul flame rage at full force. A scream of inhuman pain filled the air as the man panicked. The vines that tried to contain me fell limp. He beat his fist into my hands, and whatever was in his reach, yet I stood there impassively. His cries fell on a heart of stone as he struggled. But he did this to himself. They all did, and I couldn't bring myself to pity them any longer. He screamed and screamed until after what I felt like an eternity had passed, his struggles grew weaker and weaker until, at last, he fell limp. I scowled as I released my grasp on his head and watched his body fall in a heap. His face locked in a rictus of frozen terror, yet not a single mark of what caused his death laid upon his body. Empress. Alessia's voice tore me from my thoughts as I spun around to her. The last two laid in broken heaps across from her. Alessia, whatever I felt at that moment was overshadowed by the relief that I felt. I rushed over to her and threw my arms around her. You fucking idiot. I was so scared. I wrapped my arms around her and held her close for dear life. The thought of losing her terrified me. I had to ensure that Nyx got to safety, but they kept coming. Her arms laced around my waist, and I closed my eyes, fighting back the tears. This all was my family. Alessia, Nyx, Karen. If anything happened to them, I wasn't sure what I would do. You are not allowed to die on me, Alessia. I forbid it. I stepped back and quickly looked over all her wounds. There were so many. I didn't even realize that spirits could bleed. I wouldn't dream of it, Empress. She shot me a slight smirk, and I could only shake my head. Let's get you back to the stronghold. I want to patch you up before Nyx sees this. I reached out and tried to fix her clothing the best. For a few seconds, she was quiet, which was odd. Until I heard her poleaxe slam into the ground. I glanced up to her face and saw that her once brilliant golden eyes had faded into a pale luster, and she seemed to stare off into the distance. Alessia? I reached out towards her face, cupping it in between my hands. Panic sparked in my chest as I called her name once more and didn't receive a response. Alessia, please say something. I gave her face a soft slap, trying to get her to react. But she remained motionless and unawares. Answer me, please. For the first time in a long time, I felt tears stream down my face as I pleaded with her unmoving form. Why wasn't she replying to me? Worry ate away at my mind as tears poured down my face. I was so scared. My eyes went to my notifications as my heart clenched in my chest. I pleaded with whoever would hear me as I glanced through my notifications, dreading seeing that she had died. My eyes skimmed over everything that I deemed unimportant. The rest I filed away until later. I felt relief at seeing that nothing like that had existed. But why wasn't she answering me? I reached down and picked up her weapon, and stared at her. Don't worry, Alessia. I'm going to get you somewhere safe. I wrapped an arm around her waist, and keyed in the teleport function. The world around me distorted as I was moved back to the stronghold. I had to take her here since I didn't want to pull Karen away from Nyx. Not until I knew what was wrong with Alessia. The millisecond that the world stopped moving, I looked around to find the closest soldier, which was a zombie. You. Go to the inner sanctum. Find Karen, and tell him to meet me in the first guest room. Now. I hissed through my teeth before my eyes met a skeleton that was standing at attention close by. You, carry her weapon and follow me. I passed the pole arm quickly before I took Alessia in my arms. She was so light. Even more so than a feather. I was terrified that she would float away if I let her go. So I clung to her, like she was a tether, as I pushed into the stronghold, my eyes set on the inner building. My body burned, and exhaustion gnawed at my mind. I wanted to curl up and sleep, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew she was okay. I landed in front of the door, shifted my weight to my side, and pushed the door open, wholly ignoring the two guards that sat close by. I didn't have time to wait around for them to move. Without a pause, I pushed further into the building and quickly delved into its depth to get to the guest room suite. My heart was hammering away in my chest nonstop, and I could feel sweat mingling with my tears as I reached the door. I needed to keep it together. Falling apart now wouldn't help anybody. I adjusted Alessia slightly in my arms, reached out to the handle, quickly flung the door open, and rushed into the room. I crossed the small distance between the door and the bed and gently laid her down. Her eyes still lacked their luster, and her body hung limp. The blue liquid that ebbed freely from her cuts had lessened, yet it still tore me apart to look at her. I placed my hands over the worst of them, trying to staunch the flow in any way possible. Yet it seemed to only adhere to my fingers like a thick syrup. I pushed harder and begged for it to stop. My irritation grew as I felt like my clothing was pressing down and restricting my movements. It usually would never bother me, but now it was a thorn in my side. A low growl escaped from my lips as I yanked my mask off and threw it across the room. The cool air kissed my face, and I took a deep breath. I wiped away some of the sweat and tears crowding my face before turning my attention back to Alessia. The flow of blue blood had finally stopped. My hands were numb, and my eyes stung. Every part of me hurt and begged me to close my eyes, but I couldn't. But I didn't know what else to do. The door squealed on its hinges as Karen glided into the room, his scarlet eyes blazing like a muted fire. "Mistress, I came as quickly as I could. Karen, I don't know what's wrong with her. I've done everything that I can." I sniffled and wiped away more tears that were coming down my face. Gracefully, he slid across the room and towards Alessia and reached his hand out, and placed it gently against her forehead. His eyes dimmed for a few seconds before he retracted his bony hand. "Ah, she is suffering from soul strain. What is that? Will she be okay? How long will she be out?" I barraged him with questions as I reached out and took her hand in my mind, trying to fight the thoughts that threatened to drag me into their cold, unfeeling depths. It's caused when you push your soul past its limits. Much like a well, if you overtap it and don't give it a chance to refill. She may be out for either a few hours or a few days. Once she wakes up, she should be okay. However, I do not recommend moving her from this spot. Being a spirit, she is more susceptible to having it strained even more from excess movements. As he spoke, relief quickly replaced much of what I felt. Though anxiety was still there, lurking in the corner of my mind. "Karen, can you help me clean her up? I don't want to leave her lying here like this." I wiped away more tears as I stood up and took off the damaged clothing. Ever so gently, peeling it back from her body. The sickening sound reached my ears as I winced and stripped away. A spark of rage lit in my chest and burned gently like a candle. I'll have my vengeance. Maybe not today or tomorrow. But I'll make them pay. Once we were finished, I laid a blanket over Alessia and fixed her hair slightly, and closed her eyes. Since it only felt right. My tears had long since dried up, and now I was just so tired. "Karen, thank you." I pulled a chair over and sat down next to Alessia. "Of course, mistress. Would you like me to fetch Nyx for you?" He gave me a slight bow. His words seemed quieter than usual. "Please. Would you also fetch me the palatines as well? I will not leave Alessia here by herself, and I'll feel better with them close by." I sat down on the chair that I positioned close by the bed and leaned over to lay my head down close to her. Already, I was feeling the familiar pangs of heartache and depression tugging at me. Karen stood, regarding me with eyes that I still couldn't read. "I will be back momentarily." He bowed once more before he vanished in a display of muted gray light, leaving me in the room with just Alessia. "Oh, Alessia, why did you have to be so stupid?" I reached up and grabbed her hand and interlaced my fingers with hers, and laid there. However, in the blink of an eye, I passed out, at least until I felt a presence slam into me. "Mother!" Nyx's voice chased away a portion of the depression that I felt in that moment. "Nyx." My words came out as a slight purr as my heart jumped in happiness. Though weariness still crushed me, I fought it, just so I could see her. I pulled my hand away from Alessia and wrapped my arms around Nyx, and held her close. "What's wrong with Ms. Alessia?" she asked as she pulled away from me. Her emerald eyes pulled away from me and affixed themselves to Alessia. "She is just resting for now. She will be awake soon, okay?" I gazed at her small face and mindlessly ran my fingers through her silk-like hair. "Mother, it isn't fair." She pulled her eyes away from Alessia's sleeping form and back towards me. "Why can't I help?" "Because you are my daughter, and I refuse to let anything happen to you." I pulled her closer to me as I spoke. She was my little girl. She may be my familiar, but above that, she was a fragment of my soul. I will take care of her, no matter what. "But mother, I can take care of myself. I'm a dragon." She pulled away slightly and puffed her cheeks at me. "That may be so, but everyone out there right now is far stronger than you. You would only get hurt. Even worse, you could be killed, and that is something that I won't allow." After today's incidents, I realized that a few people here were my anchors. They kept me centered and gave me a purpose. If they were taken from me, then I honestly wouldn't know what to do. "But mother." She huffed again and crossed her arms. "No buts. The only way I would allow it is you can fight both of the Palatines and win. Only then will I let you." It seemed like a fair trade. The Palatines were the best mob that I had. They were potent and, above all else, deadly. So it would give her a chance to learn how to fight correctly on top of her schooling. Besides, it would buy me a few years to think of another excuse. In her eyes, it was a victory, no matter how small. Though I don't think it clicked with her how daunting and impossible the task would be. But, if I knew anything about her, it's that she is going to get what she wants one way or another. Deal. She jumped off of my lap and quickly scrambled across the room and onto Alessia's bed. I shifted back into the position that I was in before she arrived and interlaced my fingers with hers once more. "Oh, my sweet Alessia. Mother, will you be here tomorrow?" Nyx's voice rang in my ear like the sweetest of bells. "Yeah. I have a few small things to take care of, but outside of that, I will be here." I gently ran my thumb against Alessia's hand, hoping and praying that she would be okay. "Good. Can we spend some time together tomorrow, then?" "Of course." My words became a whisper as darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. "Okay." There was a glimmer of hope in her words that I tried to latch onto, but I couldn't stay awake any longer, and a few heartbeats later, I felt darkness take me gently into its arms. "Mistress." Karen's words pierced the darkness and pulled me from my slumber. My eyes were bleary, and my neck ached from sleeping in an awkward position. My body still hurt, but it wasn't as bad as before. I sat up and wiped away the tiredness from my eyes, and glanced over towards my two girls. Nyx was curled up next to Alessia and was fast asleep. Alessia was still out cold, which sent slight pangs of heartache through me. "Yes, Karen?" I whispered to not wake Nyx. "Redrick is here now. He's waiting for you in the meeting room." "Ah, fuck. I feel like shit, and I probably looked it too." I glanced down at my cloak and saw that it was covered in dry blood and looked tattered. I pulled it off with a grimace and threw it to the side. Thankfully, my underclothes were still in good condition and looked professional enough for a meeting with him. "Good. Let's walk and talk. I also want the briefing as well." I stood up and dusted off my shirt, and quickly ran my fingers through my hair. "Are you not going to bring your mask?" Karen walked into the room, bent over, and reached out. Its surface was covered in dried blood and dirt, and honestly, it was unpresentable. "I have neither the drive nor the will to make another, nor do I wish to leave the stronghold. So this will do for now. Besides, it's just Redrick." I shrugged as I stood up and walked over to him. "Let's get this meeting over with." A few hours earlier. POV, Redrick. When I entered the domain, the first thing that I noticed was a sky the color of freshly spilled blood. The sun had faded from a brilliant yellow into a rusted brown framed in darkness. Clouds that were once white were now gray, thunder boomed in the distance, and lightning split the sky. Crowds of adventurers were clamoring around the dock, whispering to themselves. Some even looked perturbed and angered. But not that it mattered to me. I followed Amari through the throng of people and onto one boat that floated lazily near the dock. The skeletal ferryman froze in place. The darkness of its eyes gazed off listlessly towards Greater Asteria. Its hands clenched around the paddle ever so tightly. When Amari first appeared in my office, it was a shock. Never had someone of such high rank appeared outside of the domain. Nor had someone slipped through so many adventures and guards as well. If Karen sent someone off Amari's level to fetch me, something dire must have happened. I sat down across from the woman, who, as usual, remained silent. Her azure eyes stared towards the mainland. Her hand clenched around the lower part of her uniform, but her face betrayed no emotion. Already, I'd badgered her with questions, but by the 10th, only silence reigned from her. So, I sat back and crossed my arms, and gazed across the riv. One that was usually bustling with activity but now was eerie and silent. Not even the sound of water being shifted by the paddle seemed to reach my ears. The fog that permeated this place had vanished, revealing the lonely river and not a single soul in sight. So Asteria put a temporary embargo in place and prohibited any of the adventurers from entering. That was a new move. As we got closer to the shore, I felt a strange feeling slam into my chest. Sadness sank its fangs into my heart, and my mind was bogged down with the inexorable weight of depression, yet under it all, there was a fiery rage brimming just below the surface, ready to erupt at any time. "Amari, what happened here?" I pulled my gaze away from the mainland and towards the quiet assassin, fully aware that she wouldn't speak to me. "We were attacked." Her voice split the silence and radiated through the air in a quiet whisper. It was a voice layered with sadness and anger. It shocked me she finally spoke. All this time, I figured she just didn't. "What do you mean, attacked?" I was confused. We had a treaty in place that dictated what the adventurers could and couldn't attack, though I wasn't naive enough to think that everyone would listen to the orders that we lay out for them. Silence came as the only reply as we neared the dock, leaving me with only my thoughts and the feelings that were pummeling me relentlessly. We traveled through the outer forest of Asteria, and in our wake were squads of soldiers and adventurers that lay slaughtered like cattle. Man, woman, undead. Even the docks that we just left housed the now fallen corpses of the dozens of adventurers who frequented this place. What she said finally hit me as I realized what had occurred here. This wasn't just an attack. This was a massacre. Who would do something like this? We pushed further into the forest and came across more bodies. This time, it looked like the adventurers were fighting side by side with the undead. But as I slowly connected the dots, I saw a strange corpse. One that shouldn't have been here. A single dryad lay broken in front of a long-dead zombie warrant officer. All at once, the pieces fell into place. This was Velcrest's doing. Those fools would doom us all. Amari, get me to Karen, now. The urgency was at my heels like a bloodhound. Those fucking bastards. We had a treaty with this place. We could not afford a war with Asteria. Not with the plans in place and not with the sheer amount of undead that lived here. We made it to the stronghold in what felt like a blink of an eye. But what greeted us first was devastation. Dozens of dryads were torn apart and littered the ground in front of the stronghold like macabre effigies. A countless amount of dead soldiers were spread across the field, their hands still tightly clasping the weapons they once held in life. Craters dotted the ground from magic, and arrows filled the empty spaces like a pincushion that stretched across the front of the stronghold. They had the gate propped open, and the undead within scurried out in pairs. In between each was a cloth like a stretcher, and they were rushing out to the battlefield. The ones that were already there were retrieving the bodies of the fallen. Well, the ones that were truly dead. They quickly granted the wounded ones beyond respite mercy and then placed them carefully on the stretcher before taking them back into the stronghold. Even the treeline that sat in front of the domain was not spared from the devastation. In fact, it looked as if a giant sword had cleaved the top half of the trees away in one fell swoop. I tore my eyes away from the battleground and quickly covered the distance to the gate. But the closer that I got, the more that feeling felt like it was stifling me. I was drowning in a sea of emotion that wasn't my own, and there wasn't any freedom from me. That must be what was irritating the soldiers now. A sense of shared pain. Inside of the stronghold was bustling with activity. The line of soldiers carrying the fallen went to an open area, where a giant wooden catacomb-like structure was being constructed. One team was carefully cleaning the bodies and fixing uniforms, while another was going through and placing the bodies gently into the spaces that were made for them. As I watched them, a somber thought crept into my mind. So this is what the Empress meant when she said that death was mercy here. Redrick! Gunther's voice tore me away from the spectacle, and I froze for a second, stunned at hearing my old friend's voice. Gunther, what are you doing here? What the hell happened? I looked at Amari, who looked at me with that same unflinching gaze, but thankfully understood what I was asking and paused. I was here to join the crusade. It's been a while since I've fought in a large-scale battle, and the thought alone made my blood boil. He let out a quiet chuckle and ran his hand through his shaved hair. Ah, old habits die hard, I suppose. I'm shocked that you would do something like that with the undead. I thought you hated them. As much as I wanted to rush out and hug him, I stood in the same spot, ready to keep moving the second that I could. I needed to get to the Empress and try to fix whatever problems I could before she took it out on the outside world. Me too, brother. But after spending some time with them, these ones are not that bad. Being with them reminds me of my time in the military. But Redrick, before you go, I need to warn you. That woman is a monster. His face clenched slightly, and I could clearly see the sweat forming small beads above his eyebrows. What do you mean? I mentally chewed on his words as I tried to figure out who he was talking about. The only woman I could think he was talking about was Alessia, and I knew well that she was a monster. Redrick, the Empress appeared out of the blue shortly after the battle had started. The sheer amount of power that she radiated was sickening. In all my years, I've felt nothing like it. But not just that, I watched her kill 3 greater Ents, and a whole swath of dryads by herself. His eyes went wide as he stepped forward. She's a monster, Redrick, and she was angry. I could feel it, we could all feel it. Just be careful when you see her. Okay? I took a step back from Gunther, and my mind reeled slightly from what I heard as more puzzle pieces fell into place. Ents were only made by war druids, but how did Velcrest sneak them in? How the hell did a force large enough to attack the stronghold make it in? Rage blossomed in my chest like a freshly bloomed flower at the thought of a mole in my council. But just as quickly as it blossomed, I shut it off. No, that wasn't my anger. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and instead focused on the other stuff he told me, while making a mental note to find the traitor and dispose of them. The Empress slew 3 of them? How did she manage that? More questions than answers sat on my mind as I gave Gunther a curt nod. All right, well, stay safe, old friend. I'm going to meet with the Empress and try to run damage control. He gazed at me for a second before giving me a nod, turned away, and walked back towards a squad of the undead. My gaze lingered for just a moment as I realized how odd that was. I could understand feeling a sense of camaraderie, but it wasn't like him to just change his mind. No, once I was done here, I should talk with him and see if he's really okay. I pulled my gaze away and focused on the main building of the stronghold and swallowed some excess saliva. I was scared to face the Empress, and I was also horrified by the repercussions that I would have to deal with. Damn Velcrest, damn them all to the deepest pits of the abyss. The mood in the main building was somber, at least that was what I felt as I walked further into the building and towards the meeting room. It was a crushing sadness, a sadness that I hadn't felt since I lost my father. It sat like a weight in my mind, constantly reminding me of that loss, and no matter what, I couldn't shake it. It let up slightly when the door closed behind me, and I released a pent-up breath. The room was empty, save an oval table and 10 chairs to match. Candles sat around the room in small clusters of 3 inside scones that hung from the walls. But the lighting here was dim, as darkness seemed to press in from every corner of the room, much like the emotion I felt. I found a chair and sat down. I took a deep breath as I quickly tried to plan out a way to explain to her that I didn't know how Velcrest got in. Really, there were only 2 ways that they could have gotten in. The first is a corrupt member of the governing council, and they turned a blind eye. The second is that they were sneaking them in under the guise of an adventurer. Which also told me that there was no telling how long they were planning to attack. Everything I was working on the building was on the verge of falling apart, and I hated it. I hated them. I hated them all with a burning passion. The clicking of the door pulled me from my thoughts. My heart jumped in my chest, and panic crept into me. A light rhetoric. Just explain to her everything, and try to salvage the situation. The best you can. I took one last deep breath as I calmed my nerves. I turned my head towards the door, and my breath caught in my throat. A woman strode into the room. One I didn't recognize, outside of the blazing green eyes. Her honeyed brown hair hung in loose waves down her head. Her emerald eyes were framed by the all-too-familiar dark circles of exhaustion and filled with sadness and bloodshot. Her flesh was the color of a fresh tan and was flawless until it got to her arms, which were covered in various scars that ran the length of her arms. She wore a strange shirt that glimmered in the faint light like beige silk and danced gently. Seeing her without a mask came as a shock as I never thought to see the day. But her presence brought another bout of pressure that threatened to crush me, and I found it harder to breathe. But I suffered through it. She crossed the room and went to the chair across from me. However, instead of sitting down, she grabbed its back and threw it across the room. It crashed into the back wall and shattered into dozens of pieces that flew across the room, and I found myself pressing against the back of the chair I was sitting in, trying to create some distance. She leaned forward and slammed her hands into the table, and a low growl escaped from her lips. What the hell, Redrick? Please tell me, why the hell our treaty was broken? Her growl became a snarl, and her eyes blazed with the anger that exploded outwards. I flinched away, taken aback by how she was acting. Listen, I only know as much as you do. Whatever Velcrest did was their own doing. Her jaw clenched slightly, and a sigh escaped from her lips. One that was more akin to a snarl than anything. She reached out and grabbed a chair, dragged it over, and sat down. She crossed her fingers and leered into the depths of my soul, weighing the truth of my words. The First Legion is fractured, and my captain is in a coma. My daughter was threatened, and my chosen was wounded. Her words were a whisper that writhed with quiet anger. However, I am also aware of the nature of our relationship, so I was prepared for most of that. What I am the angriest about is my daughter and chosen. As she spoke, the presence that preceded her seemed to twist as anger faded into a more morose feeling. It was a sadness that prowled into my mind and attempted to drag me down to its depths. I apologized profusely. I didn't know that Velcrest had any plans to attack you. As far as I knew, they were not mobilizing yet. If I did, I would have told you as soon as I knew. I wasn't lying when I told her that. Velcrest was a mighty nation. There wasn't much that I, nor Corinthia, could do at the moment to stop them, but at least I could have avoided this. Her eyes flared slightly as another slow breath left her nostrils. I believe you. I've always known that Velcrest would be a threat one day. She sat back in her chair, and the anger that fueled her seemed to melt away, revealing a tired woman. Her words lingered in my mind as I weighed them. How did she know about Velcrest? She implied she knew of their existence before this day. Now I struggled to remember if I mentioned them or if she had spies outside of the domain. This sadly only leads to more questions than answers. Velcrest is neither under my jurisdiction nor do we have the power to confront them now. But I will happily assist you in any way that I can to help with the damages. Now was the critical moment to make sure that I could keep our relationship together. Already the trade that we have with this domain is paying dividends. While in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't much. In the future, I could easily see this domain being an economic superpower in its own right, and that was something that I didn't want to lose. No. It's fine. We can recover. I'm just angry. She sat forward again, and the visage that she wore fell further away, revealing more than just a tired woman. No, this was a woman who was utterly depressed. Just staring at her made my heart ache in a way that I hadn't expected. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, she cut me off. However, do not take that as weakness. The depression vanished as quickly as it came, as anger rose from her once more. I will have my vengeance on them. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But I will come from them, and there will be nothing that stops me. I don't care if I have to cross the deepest pits of hell or the highest peaks of heaven. They have incurred my wrath, and for that, they will pay. She growled as her eyes lit up, and I struggled to not reach up and wipe away the sweat that had been gathering on my face. I couldn't tell if she was foolishly dumb or naively so. To declare war on Velcrest would also incur the wrath of the surrounding theocratic conferences. It would be akin to a world war, and no one wanted to deal with that. For now, let's take it easy. A war like would tear apart the world's order and might even destroy it. I refuse. Not after what they did. She slammed her hands down on the table, filling the room with a heavy thud. I'm not saying that you can't. But some things need to be handled with care until we have the strength to take care of the problem. I was trying to reel her back in. If she got too far ahead of herself, it could spell doom for us all. Yet I was also trying to walk a fine line of not insulting her any further. She stood there, her leering gaze roaring like an inferno until she finally relented. Hopefully, what I said struck a nerve. No matter how long it takes, then. It will be done. Ah, so my words have some sort of effect. It just felt so weird seeing her like this. This wasn't the woman that I felt like I knew, though I also had to admit that my knowledge of her was lacking. The pent-up breath I was holding escaped from my lungs, and I sat back in my chair, trying to figure out where I wanted to go from here. At least I salvaged the situation somewhat. Once again, the anger vanished from her face as she leaned forward and pinched her nose. Redrick, you should leave for now. I'm not really in a good spot, and I'm struggling to contain my emotions. Of course, Empress. Just send an envoy for me when you are ready to talk again, and I'll be here. Relief coursed through my veins as I stood up. I was eager to create some space between her and me. Velcrest's attack seemed to have really damaged her mentally, and I didn't want to be on the receiving end of her anger. I'll see you around, Redrick. Her eyes followed me as I gave her a nod and scurried through the room, desperate to create some space between us. I felt like I was under the watchful gaze of an apex predator, and I really didn't want to be in this domain any longer. I quickly crossed through the threshold and closed the door behind me. Now that there was a door between us, the noxious miasma that relentlessly assaulted me had tapered down a bit. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes as I tried to get a hold of myself. This place seemed to have some sort of effect on me, and I wanted to make as much space as possible. When I opened my eyes, I was greeted with the sight of Karen drifting down the hall. Lord Karen, hello. I gave the skeleton a nod, which he curtly returned. Redrick. How are you doing? His monotonous voice easily carried across the distance between us. I'm all right. My voice came out sounding a little more shaken than usual. My heart was going wild in my chest, and my palms were sweaty. Dealing with her while she was in that mood was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. Forgive the Empress. She's going through a lot right now. Karen glided down the hall, keeping pace with me as I moved. Her presence is stifling. I thought I was about to drown a few times. I shuddered a bit as I thought back to it. I've never felt something like that, even in all my days of delving into dungeons and fighting monsters. It was like I was standing before a god. That it is. We all feel it, and we are all suffering with her. His scarlet eyes pierced the darkness as we wandered further through the building. Karen, I'm curious. What role does the Chosen play? As I asked, I worked through what he said. So it wasn't just me that felt that. So her mood affected everything in the domain. That would do well to explain a lot of things here. That is a complicated question to answer, as there isn't just one answer. They perform many functions, including being able to act in place of the leader. But the relationship between the Empress and Lady Alessia is unique. The sound of bone hitting stone filled the quiet humid air, leaving me to think about what he just said. How is it unique? I found myself thinking back to each interaction between the two, figuring out what he meant. But I was coming up dry. As far as I was concerned, Alessia was a warrior, and the Empress was her charge. Are you familiar with a cornerstone? Karen broke through my thoughts as easily as a blade cutting through the air. Yes, it's a stone that connects two walls. Considered one of the most important parts of the building next to the foundation. But what does that have to do with Alessia? Perhaps that wasn't the right phrase to use. Alessia is like a chain that keeps the Empress together. When she died, the entire realm felt the wrath of the Empress. That is a fate I doubt your world would want to suffer, and there would be very little I or you could do to stop if it came to that. His words lingered in my mind, conveying a sense of dread mingled with what she had told me earlier. I needed to get back to Kato and discuss what had happened. Thankfully, it still seemed like she was on our side, but the Velcrest issue would have to be addressed soon because otherwise, we would have to deal with a cataclysm. Damn them all for this. I walked back to Alessia's room, still partially fuming. But more than anything, I was just tired. The words that Redrick and I shared hung heavy on my mind. I wanted to leave my domain and burn that country to the ground, but I had to wait. As I fought the next wave of anger, I clenched my fist. I needed to get it under control before I saw Nyx again. I had to keep the image up for her. As I reached the door, I paused. My fingers brushed against the cool wooden frame. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my rapidly thrumming heart. I pushed the door open with one last deep breath and quickly glanced around the room. Alessia was still asleep, and Nyx was sitting on the edge, kicking her feet. Her face slightly scrunched up in thought. At least until she noticed me standing there. A slight grin crossed her face as she jumped off the bed quietly and rushed over. Thankfully, when I saw her, a lot of what I felt had vanished, but it still lingered in the corner of my mind, waiting for its next chance to strike. Hello, Mother. The little girl reached me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Hello, Nyx. I gave her a gentle pat on the head, though my eyes lingered on Alessia's form. I wish she would wake up. What do you want to do today? Nyx pulled away and looked up at me. Her eyes glinted in the candlelight, and her flesh seemed to have darkened ever so slightly. Honestly, I didn't know myself. When I told her we could do something, I didn't really think about it. I've just been so caught up in all of this that it slipped my mind. Well, what would you like to do then? If all else fails, then I'd let her choose. That would be the best option. She scrunched her face up slightly for just a few seconds before she replied. Can we explore? I've been cooped up here and in the house so much. I want to get out and see the rest of the world. I weighed her words, and a part of me thought it was a bad idea. What if we went out and got attacked? Well, I should be able to keep her safe. Besides, everyone in my domain should be dead or temporarily kicked out until we have cleaned up the bodies. Which also means that I need to keep her away from it all. As much as I didn't want to let her out of the walls, I relented. It wouldn't be fair for her to be stuck here. Hopefully, once the crusade starts and the city is reclaimed, I could let her out a little more. Of course. I can take you to one of my favorite spots. A small squeal escaped from her mouth as she jumped up. Let's go. The day is already ending. She reached up and grabbed my hand and tugged me out of the room with the enthusiasm that only a child could muster, and I accepted my fate. The undead, thankfully, worked quickly and relentlessly as they cleared the roads, leaving very little for Nyx to see outside of the scenery here. She skipped down the road, humming quietly to herself as she looked around the area. Mother, what is that? She stopped and pointed towards one of the undead Lynels that wandered through the area. Its gray coat covered in various scratches and putrid wounds. Its cloudy white eyes settled on us as its jaw worked slowly on whatever it was chewing. That's a Lynel. It's like a giant deer. I walked over to her and placed my hand on her shoulder. Its antler was deep beige, slowly turning into a putrid brown and covered in decaying viscera. She put her hands on her hips and nodded as she looked over the beast. Can we keep it? It looks strong. No, you have the wolves at home. We don't need another pet. I chuckled at her and pulled her further down the road. But Mother, please. She drew the words out as she pouted at me, following behind me, dragging her feet through the dirt. No. No more pets. I stopped and reached my hand out for her to take as we walked down the road together. She slowly shambled up and took my hand. A pout was etched across her face. Such a spoiled little girl. But I couldn't give her everything that she wanted. I wanted her to grow up and not be like Mitter or a spoiled rich child. That was a life that I didn't want her to live. Thankfully, she seemed receptive, mostly. As we walked, the dreary grays and browns faded into radiant green. Trees lined the road, dancing with the gentle wind. The smell of death faded and was replaced by the soft scent of dozens of plants that were intermingling with each other. Nix's eyes went wide as she saw the beauty of living nature for the first time, and I couldn't help but be happy that I got to experience that with her. "Mother, it's so pretty." She froze as she looked at the trees. She let go of my hand and rushed forward with a mad giggle. I watched her as she ran forward, grabbed a few leaves, and jumped around. I crossed my arms and stared at her with a faint smile on my face. "Nix, don't run too far ahead, please." I dropped my arms and followed behind her, keeping one eye on the environment and the other on her. My words fell on deaf ears as she kept running around. Her black dress caught the wind trails she left behind, writhing on the wind as if it was a living being. She was having the time of her life, and I was all for it. "Nix, if you want, you can turn into a dragon. You don't have to stay in human form." She paused in the middle of a jump and turned her head to me. Her reply came in another squeal of excitement as her flesh became a liquid and quickly morphed into scales. The hair on her head flattened and fell into the strange liquid that was covering her body. The clothing that she wore was pulled taut against her body as it slowly faded, leaving scales as dark as a raven's feathers. Her lithe limbs stretched out and grew stocky as they quickly transformed into that of a beast. The entire transformation took no longer than just a handful of seconds and was finished by she landed. She came up to just a little past my knees on all fours. Her eyes still kept the same emerald shade and radiated a sense of complete happiness. Her jaw held dozens of sharp, jagged white teeth that glimmered in the dying sunlight and was twisted into a visage of a grin. A set of tiny wings sat on her back and were tucked away. She bounded through the underbrush gracefully, and her laughter roared as she vanished from sight. She left me breathless. I knew that she was my familiar, yet more and more, I saw her as my daughter. Sometimes I even forgot she was a dragon. So being able to bound around in that form must have been a relief. I kept walking down the road, keenly aware that the rustling of the foliage was her. So I just kept walking and following the sound. Yet I was lost in my thoughts. I had a few dragon-based skills, so it made me curious about what I looked like when they were active, but that was something that I would look at later. Speaking of which, didn't I have notifications I dismissed? Quickly, I went through my menu and looked through what had built up. You have slain a level 45 war druid. You have slain a greater ent. You have slain a greater ent. You have slain a common dryad. You have slain a common dryad. You have learned the ability Soul Devour. Draconic Flesh has leveled up. Dragon Claws template has leveled up. Soul Flame has leveled up. You have learned Anima Lightning. Your hand-to-hand proficiency has leveled up. My eyes went down the list, drinking in the information. Yet I had a pressing question. I thought you could only learn skills by leveling up. So how did I learn skills without selecting them? It felt like the system that had governed my life was slowly changing. Even now, it felt like it was slowly fading away from me, as things became more and more natural. Perhaps I needed to speak with Karen about this all and see what was going on. More than likely, it had something to do with the Whispers trait that governs this domain. But I still wasn't sure how I felt about it. I didn't like feeling like I didn't have any control over my life. I kept walking down the path, following Nix's sounds. I was lost entirely in my own thoughts at the moment, pondering on what this all meant. I killed a man yesterday, and I was heartless about it, but why couldn't I bring myself to care more? It's because they threatened Alessia. Why should I spare any extra thought for them? But I was still conflicted nonetheless. Was this my path? Was this path laid out for me because of the desire of others? I didn't know. I needed to figure this out. "Mother!" Nix's voice tore through the underbrush as she burst through like a bullet. In her jaw were many flowers. Some looked like a type of orchids, while others were utterly alien to me. "What are these?" The flowers that were packed into her mouth muffled her words a bit. Her draconic face was alight with joy, and she was covered in grime and dead leaves. "These are flowers. Though as to their names, I can't tell you." She bounded in front of me, dropped the bundle, and sat back on her haunches. "They are so pretty. Why is nothing colorful further in?" She tilted her head slightly and regarded me with a soft gaze. "Because everything further is in a different stage. Here, everything is in full bloom and full of life." I squatted down and reached out to take a flower that had caught my eye. Its outer petals were snow white and enshrined an inner set of violet petals. I brought it to my nose and gave it a soft sniff, enjoying the floral scent. Nix, watching what I was doing, attempted the same, though it looked like a struggle in her current form. So instead, she transformed back into a human. Her scales melted away like ice on a hot summer day, and her wings were pulled back into her body. Her snout shrunk in size as it formed back into a human face, albeit one covered in dirt and grime. She reached out towards one flower with a now human hand and copied me, trying to get a scent on the flower, only for her to almost inhale it. She coughed violently as she tore the flower away from her face. I laughed so hard I almost snorted as I watched her struggle. No, Nyx, like this. I brought the small flower back to my face and sniffed it softly once more. She looked at the flower quizzically before attempting to sniff it once more. This time it was with better results than before. Her face lit up slightly, and a dopey grin crossed her face. These smell good. Can we keep them? You can, yes, but you need to give them water. However, they won't be like this forever. I stood up and walked over to her, brushed her hair back, and tucked the flower that I was holding in right next to her ear. But why? She asked, and she pouted once more. Her hand, in the process, reached upwards to touch what I had just recently placed. Because with all things, they will eventually die. I gave her a soft pat on the head before I stood up. What does that mean? Her hand lingered on the flower, and her gaze seemed distant, like she was trying to put together a puzzle in her mind. Well, death is the opposite of life. These flowers here are all alive, but they will wither away and die in a day or maybe even weeks if you are lucky. They will cease to exist as they are, making room for something else to take their place. I struggled to explain to her the meaning of life and death since I wasn't sure how to explain it in a non-technical point to her. Does that mean one day you will die too? Her words struck a strange chord with me. My death wasn't something that I thought about. Well, nothing ever truly escapes death. So yes, one day, but not for a very long time. But I also knew that I had quite a while left in me. But lying to her and telling her that the day would never come felt wrong. Death is always there, waiting for us. To say otherwise was foolish. No. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around my waist. I won't let you die. I was touched by how she felt. I truly was. There, Nyx. You won't have to worry about it for quite a while. I reached down and gently patted her shoulder. No. I won't let anything take you away from me. I don't care who or what it is. I'll fight death even if I have to. Her words were muffled as she spoke into my stomach, but her conveyed threat was as clear as day. I chuckled as I ran my fingers through her hair and held her close to me. Do you want to know another secret? She pulled her head away from my stomach. Her emerald eyes were a little puffy and slightly bloodshot. What is it, mother? In this place, death can claim nothing unless I allow it. In here, I am stronger than death. As I spoke to her, she looked up at me in awe. The awe of a child who sees their parents as a flawless hero. Oh, I wish it could stay like that forever. I dread the day that she realizes that I'm not infallible. Her sorrow drained from her face, and a smile covered the sadness that had taken residence on her face. Come on, mother, let's go further in. I want to keep exploring. She stepped back and took my hand in hers. Our last conversation was overwhelmed by her excitement to see more of the place she called home. Though if I knew her well enough, the conversation wasn't done. It was just put on the back burner until she figured out how to approach it again. But that was a topic for another day. For now, I just wanted to spend some time with her. Mother, look. That is much bigger than our bath. She slipped her fingers out of mine and bounded towards the lake. There were a few fireplaces scattered around the shore and abandoned equipment. It really marred the beauty here, but I held my rage back at that. They were like a plague that destroyed everything they touched. That's a lake. It's one of my favorite spots here, though I can't visit it often. I explained to her as we walked down the shoreline. I kicked aside some of the equipment left there, thoroughly annoyed by its presence. I would have to consume it in my spare time. It's so pretty. She giggled as she ran ahead and played in the sand, further sullying her clothing. Her raven hair, now filled with sand, and her face covered in dirt. Her violet dress was crusted with water-laden sand, but none of that seemed to matter to her. She was as happy as could be. Her happiness acted as a counterbalance to the depression that lingered in the corners of my mind. Honestly, I was still sad, but doing this with her was enough to hold it at bay. For now, I'll just do my best to enjoy it. A few hours later, Nyx and I were walking down the road together. Her hair was still slightly damp from the time we spent in the water, and now she was thankfully clean. It seemed a lot of her energy was spent, and now she was just content walking with me, humming quietly to herself. She still had that flower that I placed on her ear and took great care to ensure it was okay. The stronghold was coming into focus, and my happiness was fading, much like the gentle flame of a candle drenched by a torrent of water. My heart ached for what happened here, and trying to feel otherwise was impossible. Thankfully, Nyx seemed content to sit in silence, though I questioned a few things about her. She was brilliant and seemed to put things together quickly. It was scary, really. At some point, she would surpass me, whether I like it or not. I might need to kick things into overcharge if I want to stay a step ahead. We both walked quietly towards the stronghold, and I found myself unable to wait to get back to Alessia's side. It was like a driving force that spurred me to hurry and return. It ate away at me and weighed on my mind like 1,000 bags of stone. After what felt like an eternity of walking, we finally made it back to the guest suite. The two palatines stood at attention by the door. Both were as still as statues. Not even the ambient draft coursed through the hall could make their clothes budge. Just two statues of perfectly unrelenting duty. The one on the right reached out and opened the door for Nyx and me without a word. We both stepped in, and Nyx rushed across the room. In a flash, she was already on the bed, ready to stretch out and go to sleep. I, however, went back to the chair and sat down. Alessia was still out cold, but she looked more solid than before. Where her flesh was once an etheric blue, it was now becoming more corporeal, much like when I saw her in those dreams I have. I sighed as I settled in and reached out to touch her face. My beautiful Alessia. The more I thought about it, the stranger it was all to me. I was falling more and more for a spirit. I couldn't understand why, but I was. She was becoming more and more vital to me with each passing second. In that same thought process, I was furious with her for risking her life. How dare she think she has the right to leave me? She was stuck here with me, and I'll be damned if she thinks she can get away. I'll find her and drag her back here, and there won't be a force that can stop me. I glanced over and saw that Nyx had quickly fallen asleep, curled up next to Alessia. A faint smile crossed my face as I looked over at her before resting my head next to Alessia and reaching out for her hand, quickly interlacing our fingers. I passed out a few deep breaths later, but not before I heard Alessia's voice mumble. Quintus, how could you betray us? I fell once more. It was something that I wasn't ready for, but it was relentless. I plummeted through what felt like a limitless fog as my mind tried to connect the dots. Who was Quintus again? My mind wandered and drifted as I fell through the haze until at least it clicked. He was once a great hero. He was the angel of people, at least until he fell. But just as suddenly as the thought came, the fog was torn away from my vision. I stood in a large courtyard. Overlooking it was an enormous palace that stood at the top of a large flight of stairs. All around me were countless bodies. The once beautiful courtyard was now filled with dried and coagulated blood. Heads were cleanly cut from their body, and corpses lay strewn from head to toe and stacked high. But the rest of the area was covered in what looked like white static, obscuring everything else that wasn't important. My eyes wandered, soaking in the carnage. What could have caused all of this? Show yourself, you filthy traitor. I heard Alessia's voice tear through the eerie silence. Her words filled to the brim with bile and hatred. Quickly, my eyes locked onto her, and it felt like a serrated blade stabbed my heart. Her once beautiful mane of white hair was now matted and covered in drying blood. Her once golden armor was broken and sundered in countless places, letting blood ebb out in a steady flow. Her face was pale, and dark rings encased her eyes. The poleaxe she used was scratched, chipped, and covered in dried blood. Its luster was drowned by the sheer amount of life it had taken. Oh, Alessia, you haven't changed one bit, have you? A voice came from the shadows. I could only describe it as snide yet angelic. Like a choir of angels were speaking all at once. She flourished her poleaxe and pointed it in the being's direction. My eyes followed it, and I was horrified by what I saw. He looked like an angel. Nobility radiated off him in sickening waves, and his body was sculpted to absolute perfection. He lacked any sort of clothing outside of a pair of slender black pants. But yet his porcelain flesh rippled and writhed like something was lurking under the surface, waiting to be released. His face was absolutely flawless save for a set of glowing red eyes. Her poleaxe quivered slightly. Why, Quintus, why did you betray us? Her words trailed off slightly as she regarded the angelic man as he moved forward. Each step was exaggerated to show how sublime his body was crafted and how easy it was to move. A twisted sneer crossed his face, marring his beauty. Alessia the favored. Alessia the chosen. Why do you have to come and usurp what was always mine? His muscles flexed, and the two exquisitely carved swords twisted in the air, beckoning to drink fresh blood. I did this for you, fool. You always seek glory, and there is none to be found here. Once I discovered you were to be chosen, I realized that you would have withered here. All the glory that you seek would be out of reach. All the new experiences would be forever lost to you. I shouldered that burden so you can continue to live. But you betrayed me. Tears streamed down her face, washing away dried blood and dirt. A primal scream ripped through the air, conveying a sense of pain and betrayal that I couldn't comprehend. I never needed your help. You were always better than me. He clenched his fist around his blades as tears streamed down his eyes, as a strange golden aura glowed behind him. No matter what heights I reached, you were always better. No matter what I did, they always whispered your name on the streets in awe. I've slain so many monsters, I've saved so many people. I've led armies, I've broken cities. I've cut down walking apocalypses. Yet, why have I never overcome your shadow? Quintus, I have never once tried to outdo you. Everything I've ever done was for you. Those days on the streets, I did what I did, so you could live. I've stolen and fought so that we could live another day. I gave everything just so you could live. Now, I've given everything I have left to give, and this is how you repay me? The quivering of her poleaxe ended, and her golden eyes lit up. A hiss escaped from his lips. It doesn't matter anymore. I've made my choice. Come stand with me, Alessia. Together, we can rule as gods. We can overthrow death and live forever. Alessia stood there before casting aside her poleaxe and grabbed two swords lying on the ground. No. You have betrayed me. You have betrayed Asteria, and for what? Petty vengeance? The maiden has fed you honeyed words of poison, and you've allowed them to blind you. She stood up and skillfully brandished the two swords. My name is Alessia Veers. I am the chosen of the Empress and her beloved. I renounce you, Quintus Regulus Veers. I renounce you as my brother. I renounce you as the angel of Asteria, and I renounce you as a hero. As I stood there watching, I was floored. This was a brother fighting a sister. This was all caused by petty vengeance? The dots connected as I stared at the two, realizing what I was watching. This was where Alessia died. I rushed forward, trying to reach them, but a barrier stopped me. No, I didn't want to watch this. Quintus stood there, and for a moment, his red eyes flickered. Sister. He seemed like he regretted this all, but it vanished just as quickly as it came. With a clap like thunder, Quintus covered the distance, and their swords met with a boom. Blood and stone flew in every direction as two gods of war met in a titanic clash. They traded dozens of blows in a blink of an eye, with neither side being able to score a hit on the other. In a flash, they both broke away from each other, with Alessia looking even worse than she did before. You've been fighting for 3 days straight. How are you still this strong? He hissed as his breath came in ragged waves. As long as I draw breath, I will never relent. I have taken my vows, and I will live by them, in life and in death. For her, there is nothing I will not do. There is no moral that I won't shatter. She stood, and blood ran more freely than before, but I knew that the fight was ending. She couldn't possibly keep going on. Even after all these years, you haven't changed. Your sense of loyalty is admirable, sister. Perhaps once I finish with you, I'll see what you enjoyed so much about her. Quintus's words made my skin crawl with the sheer amount of hatred that oozed from them. He pointed his blades toward Alessia, and golden spears formed from the air, each radiating a holy fire that washed me in feelings of purity and righteousness. A direct opposite of what radiated from the man. With a flick of his wrist, the dozens of spears rushed towards Alessia like bullets. She gritted her teeth and nimbly cut through all but one, which broke through her armor. With a sickening crunch, it impaled her to the stone of the courtyard. But if there was one thing that I know about you, it's that you cannot use magic. It's almost admirable how far you've gotten with just the use of blade work alone, but that won't save you now. My heart shattered as she coughed up blood. Weakly, she reached up, placed her hand on the spear's haft, and clenched it. The magic that held it together shattered under her grip, dropping her to the ground in a twisted heap. Abomination. Accursed. She struggled to get to her feet. Blood came in a torrent as she pushed herself further. There was so much blood. More than I thought possible, but it just kept flowing. Why was she doing this? I'm not worth that much. I struggled against the barrier, trying to get to her. I wanted it all to end for her sake. She didn't deserve to die like this. Not for me. She stood up. Her golden eyes dimmed by the second as she clenched her blades. I knew what was coming next, but I couldn't stop it. I reached out, desperate to stop it, but I couldn't. Quintus circled her like a hound. Look at you. Look at how weak you are. How pitiful. How far you have fallen, dear sister. He sneered at her as she stood there. The torrent of blood from her finally slowed to a trickle. Alessia's gaze seemed to stretch to eternity before her golden eyes lit once more. This ends here. Her words were weak, but her body quickly took up a fighting stance. Then let's end this. He readied his swords as he rushed forward. Their swords met once more in a blinding display of light. Each impact drove craters into the ground under them as the two gods clashed. But Quintus still had the upper hand. Nothing she could do could overwhelm his defenses. At least until I saw Alessia make a mistake and open her guard, which Quintus quickly took advantage of. In a heartbeat, he was on her, his swords coming to deliver the killing blow. She slipped his guard and plunged one sword into his heart, and the other into his stomach, just as his swords cleaved her cleanly in two. The lower half of her body hit the ground, and Quintus stood, trying to gasp for breath. Malefic red tendrils slithered around him like a snake in the surrounding air. Alessia was still alive, but just barely. Her fingers weakly stretched out towards the hilt of the swords that were still embedded in the man's body. Shh, rest now, my dear sister. The fire that raged in his eyes turned to a burning cinder as he ever so gently lay her down on the ground. His words were airless, yet the red energy around him seeped into his body. You have earned this defeat. He lay her down like a loving brother, easily swatting away her weak fingers. Blood coated his lips and drained from his chest. Yet the surrounding energies pulsed with unnatural life and entered him as his life left him. Even though he was dying, he forced himself to breathe as he laid his dirty hands on my Alessia. My blades have drunk father's life and the life of everyone in our order. But I didn't want them to drink yours. The cinders in his eyes faded, only to be replaced by two eyes of golden radiance as the man wept. Alessia, I'm so sorry. The surrounding energies twisted and writhed in fury as the veil was lifted from his eyes. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I saw what I was doing but couldn't stop it. Please, I don't want this. The surrounding energies grew in intensity and shifted from red to putrid green. The light in Alessia's eyes faded and shifted to that of the milky white of the freshly deceased. Yet, even in death, she still reached up towards the blades sheathed in the man's body. Her last words were spoken in complete and utter clarity. I can never forgive you for what you have done. This place will be your tomb. With that, her hand fell away, and the man wept as he was shrouded in rancid green energies that destroyed a once beautiful angel and crafted a monster in its place. Redrick POV. I stumbled out of the domain and gazed at the palisades that stood guard at the entrance. Soldiers clad in brilliant red armor stood at the ready and checked in the constant stream of adventurers pouring in from the north. There were dozens of workers in the area clearing out trees and gathering materials to be brought back to what essentially was becoming a small bustling city. Currently, the defenses were in the process of being overhauled due to what was seen during the inauguration and the fear the undead could turn their focus to the outside world. I quickly covered the stone road and walked towards the gate, where two soldiers stood at the guard and checked in some adventurers and ensured that the proper taxes were getting paid on the gear they received. It was a flat tax rate, but many were still chaffed the wrong way with paying for stuff they haven't sold yet, but it has to be done. The kingdom needed funds, and there was no better way to get them. One soldier by the gate saw me, gave me a slight nod, and stepped to the side, allowing me to skip past the line and walk right past everyone. Which earned me some scornful glares. Which didn't bother me in the slightest since I didn't really advertise that I was the governor. The less they knew, the better. It gave me more freedom to do as I pleased and allowed me to see how things function in the city without having people act differently under the prying eyes of authority. It also helped me root out those that didn't belong, if anything. I slipped into the city's outskirts, quietly moving down the road. Adventurers were bustling down the street. Some were trying to haggle down prices at the various stores or get their equipment repaired. Just another day in the city. Just another day for them, at least. I kept wandering down the streets, walking back towards the city superior and my office. The wave of emotion that I felt from earlier still lingered, much like an unpleasant taste, constantly reminding me of what had occurred. It was terribly vexing. It was painful dealing with the Empress in her current state of mind. It was as if she were dealing with two distinct personalities. At one point it was a wave of searing passionate anger, then a wave of cold depression. It was just an undulating wave of constantly changing emotions that drove daggers through me. It was such unbidden power that it was sickening but terrifying that she couldn't control it. Perhaps it was to be expected with the anguish that she was feeling. But it also brought back the words that Karen spoke to me. About what Alessia meant to the Empress. Just how much could one person mean? Were they lovers, perhaps? It would make the most sense for that level of emotional instability. Not that I was judging, I didn't see an issue with it. I was always a fan of loving whoever you wanted. Whether it be the same sex or a different species. Though there were always proponents for keeping things pure, so to say, but I didn't really care about that. Before I knew it, I arrived back at the functioning city center. Here the city was teeming with life. A far cry from the forest that had once been here. In months, we quickly built the city up from scratch. All it cost was close to a fortune and the desire for adventurers to have a home. Not to mention the desire of the other nations to establish ties with the domain. That alone boosted the size of the city and allowed for a few embassies to be built, which caused tensions to rise. In many people's eyes, it was preposterous to have beastkins roaming free here, especially with the beastkin equivalent of adventurer guilds establishing bases here. To many of the traditionalists, it was a direct war against the traditions that have guided them for centuries. To some, it didn't matter. It opened up trade, and it lined pockets. To the rest, they welcomed it. I didn't have any particular thoughts about them. Perhaps a small amount of joy, but that was really just the greed inside me speaking. Money was money, and I didn't care who it came from. I navigated through the city square and towards the building that functioned as my headquarters. 2 soldiers clad in glowing silver armor stood at attention next to the small bronze gate. A plume of turquoise griffin hair sat at the top of the full-plate helmet, matched by a silvery blue cape that fluttered in the wind. The one on the right turned their head and regarded me with a powerful gaze. Their eyes lost in the darkness that their closed helm cast across their face. I felt my skin crawl as they stared at me. As if thousands of ants were slowly crawling across every inch of my body. It felt like an eternity before they broke the gaze, and the feeling stopped. The knight stepped to the side in a fluid motion and opened the gate for me. Mentally, I shuddered as I walked past them. They were both from the King's Guard. Their names were never given to me. Even the system, when I once attempted to analyze them, refused to give me any information. Outside of 3 question marks that hung like omens of death just above their head. Which made me question how Amari slipped past them. What powers did she possess? Did they let her in? Did she have a permit? I bit my cheek as I walked further into what was for all intents and purposes, my home. The thoughts were relentless in their creation as more and more questions formed. I slipped into my foyer, and my head butler appeared as if the shadows had given birth to him. Master Redrick. Welcome back. He reached a single white glove-clad hand out towards me, and I pulled off my cloak. Thank you. Can you fetch Cato for me? We have a few things we need to discuss. Also, can you have one maid deliver some Fenrisian ale to me? I've had a long day. I dropped my cloak off in his hand and kept walking down the hall. Normally I would spare more time for them, but now I was just drained. Mentally, I was worn down. Emotionally, I was suffering from an extreme case of whiplash, and physically, well, I was just tired. Of course. My head butler's voice faded away behind me as I stumbled down the hall. Exhaustion clawed at my ankles, trying to drag me down to the ground, but I didn't quite want to go to sleep just yet. I still needed to meet with Cato and potentially the other envoys with good ties with Asteria. Which at the moment, that list was small. I've had a hell of a time filtering down many nations that wanted their hands on the domain. After all, too many hands can ruin the fish, or something like that. I wasn't too sure about the exact quote. It took a bit to get to my office, but when I did, I stumbled over to my desk and sat down. Much of the fatigue that I felt was washed away and replaced with a feeling of being at home. Really, at the end of the day, there was no feeling like that of being at my desk. I love dealing with paperwork, and I love politics. There was nothing like making plans and placing pieces of the puzzle down. Almost giddy, I looked through the stacks of paper to see what had stacked up since I had left. The first was various information, like the daily tax income of the adventurers and monthly tax statements. I kept things as cheap as I could here since the quantity of adventurers would bolster the losses. The most significant sort of tax was the coins that came from the domain. Sadly, I had to tax at the highest rate I could get away with. Mainly to stop the value of the currency from dropping too low. If I let every adventurer get out of here with all the money they were raking in, then the entire economy could collapse. Strictly from the value of gold and silver plummeting. After all, there was a reason we had to outlaw transfiguration, and constantly keep pulling gold out of supply, and create a few coins above that to act as a counterbalance. Why are we stuck with gold as the cornerstone of the economy? Who knows, now it's more of a hassle than anything else and is far too ingrained in tradition to do anything about. So now many governors and leaders are forced to constantly suck money out of the economy to combat illegal transfiguration and inflation. A process that sometimes collapses and sends prices sky high, but that usually only occurs when dungeons and domains are born. We seem to be in an era of right now. Already reports show that a few dungeons were born throughout the continent, and 2 upgraded into domains. This means that the economy may start to overinflated. It's going to take a few years to balance everything out, especially if the dungeon city leaders can't do their jobs properly. I pushed away from the tax documents and mentally made a note to take a portion of the taxes for the city, send a portion to the crown and regional nobles as taxes, and a portion to keep in reserve just in case something happens. The rest was signed off to be sent to the crown treasury as money to be taken out of circulation. With that being done, I started working through the rest of the paperwork while waiting for Cato to arrive. I poured through paperwork for about an hour, signing off on new laws and dissolving ones that were no longer relevant here. The mound of the paperwork quickly shrank until I hit a slight hitch. It was a scroll that talked about a runaway slave that recently came into custody. Well, technically because of the laws of the kingdoms, slavery is illegal, so now it was a ward to the city. However, that also means that the owner would come looking. I usually wouldn't pay attention to something as trivial as a runaway slave, outside of signing custody over to a city department, but something caught my eye. The slave held a class simply known as forbidden, which alone piqued my interest. Usually, when a being held that, it was a hereditary class. Something that the system couldn't or wouldn't categorize. However, not all forbidden classes came in handy. Sometimes they were useless and only hindered, while other times, they were extremely powerful, and could rival even some of the super weapons that kingdoms held. The only issue is that, unless the person told you what the class was, there was no way of knowing if you stumbled onto something worthwhile or not. I stared at the document for some time as a plan formed. If it was a unique forbidden class, then I might gift the slave to the domain. While it could make the domain even more dangerous, it would also further lay a foundation for me to keep building up our alliance. After all, if I could keep in Asteria's good graces, I could continue building up wealth and power. As long as I'm subtle about it, I can climb to the top before anyone else knows it. But I need to make sure that the foundation is strong first. With that being said, I doubt I can draw the ire of the domain as long as I keep everyone I can off of her daughter and her chosen. Those 2 were important enough to her to take on a Velcrest task force, so I couldn't use them as bargaining chips. Otherwise, I risk her leaving the domain and rampaging across the countryside, which would ruin everything that I was working on. I would need to keep building the connections between Corinthia and Asteria and keep distinguishing us as valuable allies, as well as ensuring that I could collect as many chips as I could to barter with. At the moment, Asteria held more than I did, so I didn't quite want to play my hand yet. But now that I had time to think and process things, Velcrest making a move as early as they did was also a good thing. It was a blunder that I could turn into an opportunity on my end. The only issue that I had moving forward was going to be that skeleton. Charon was a fearsome foe, both intellectually and as a boss. He alone was a significant player, and I see why he was the prime minister. I finished recounting my tale to Cato, who stood by the window overlooking the city square. The sun had started its journey downward, casting warm orange light through the window. To my right was a mug of that Fenrisian ale that I had asked for. The liquid was tart and bit at the throat, almost painfully so, but it gave a burst of energy that couldn't be matched. So, she essentially declared war on Velcrest? He stood, unmoving, as his gaze lingered on whatever sat just outside of the window. Correct. I reached out and grabbed the mug and quickly threw back another gulp of the tart liquid. It clung to my tongue, almost refusing to go down my throat with how thick it was. Silence hung in the air as I swallowed it, thankfully allowing me some time to think and plan my next response. At the moment, we are in the clear, as their war master is preparing for the crusade into the domain. However, I'm afraid if Velcrest does something like this again, we won't be able to avert the disaster. Perhaps we don't have to. We can try to plan ahead and cut them off, but one day, we can just allow them to waltz into the domain. It should spark a reaction and drag the entire Confederation into a war. Once weakened, we can easily swoop in. However, their biggest deterrent at the moment is the Saint of Blades. He pulled his gaze away from the window and walked towards the chair across from my desk. his hands clasped firmly behind his back. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of a war right now. There are too many puzzle pieces in play. Once we have purged part of the nobility and ensured that we have a solidified alliance with Asteria, I think we could win. Asteria could bear the bulk of the war, and we can easily move in and clean up. However, that begs the question for us, Cato, what is our stance on Asteria? While I was a fan of ensuring the theocratic confederacies were eradicated, it still felt wrong to lead Asteria into the mix. The king sees Asteria as a valuable chess piece. However, with that being said, we are aware of the strength it possesses, and we will react accordingly. If possible, we would like to maintain an alliance with them. The number of benefits that the domain grants us is far too significant to just let go to waste. Once we know how Asteria truly functions, we will go from there. He gazed at me with raging blue eyes as he settled into his seat. I nodded along, glad to see that roughly the king and I had the same idea on Asteria. I wanted to keep them around, especially as an additional deterrent. While I recognize Asteria maintains neutrality, that still doesn't mean that we can't use it to our advantage. Fair enough, Cato. We just have to keep in mind that the Empress, if what was said is to be believed, is incredibly powerful. Hell, the amount of strength that she radiates right now is enough to confirm that, for me at least. I'd say that she would be a super weapon. Ah yes, I can't forget that. Her, Alessia, and the entire guard are powerful indeed. He sighed as he reached up and scratched his head. I crossed my fingers and leaned forward on my desk. Each nation had a handful of high-leveled individuals that function as weapons of mass destruction. A remnant of a long-forgotten arms race of sorts. Now, they keep the peace through mutually assured destruction. Though supposedly, some of them are friends. But it was something that I questioned. After all, how do you keep someone so grossly powerful under your control? Well, I did have an idea if you are interested in hearing it. It may benefit us, in the long run, if it works out as planned. Oh? Do tell. He raised a single eyebrow as he crossed one of his legs. Well, I want to keep Asteria as a powerful force for us to use. With that being said, I want to funnel a little more resources for them to use. One that I have in mind is a runaway slave that recently came into my custody. With a forbidden class. I leaned forward a little more, waiting for Cato to pick up on what I was telling him. So, you intend to funnel the domain, and by extension, the Empress, hoping to lay a foundation for future deterrence all while under the pretense of staying allies. Interesting, but it's also a risky proposition if you anger the domain. His eyes glimmered slightly as he had already worked through the information that I had given. Correct. If we can stay in the good graces, we can, for all intents and purposes, put a leash in the domain, though I'm not advocating for a complete takeover, but enough to have enough of an influence on them. I relaxed my hands a bit and sat back. I was happy that things were going a bit in the direction I wanted them. One step at a time. I see. It's something to consider. It's a fine line, Redrick. If Asteria proves to be hostile, we lay the bricks of our own defeat. The severity of his words weighed on me a bit, asking me to think about what I was asking. It was tough. Already Asteria was dangerous, and if we fanned the flames too much, it could become a raging inferno that would consume us. If we didn't put enough fuel into it, then it would be but a small flame, the smallest of gusts, would easily blow that out. It was kind of stupid that we were hitching our plans on an undead domain, but a chance like this only came once in a lifetime. I know, but it has to work. It has no choice but to. I sighed as I relaxed in my seat a bit. That is also true. Just don't get your hopes up. In the end, the only thing that you can rely on is yourself. The words came out with a sense of finality as we both sat in silence and weighed what was to come. At least until he broke the silence once more. Oh, Redrick, I meant to tell you that there was a caravan coming towards this area. I heard there were some Northmen in there. The topic quickly shifted, and I shuffled our earlier conversation into a mental cabinet. It was something to think about later, though, after this, I wanted to visit that slave and see what the class was. Northmen, huh? They don't usually come down this far south. It was interesting. We called them Northmen, even though they weren't quite men. But they rarely left the lands of perpetual winter. Yeah. It's a full merchant caravan, so there aren't just Northmen in there. If what you think is planning is good, I suggest you look at the wares. You may find something of use there. With that being said, he stood up and gave me a wink before wandering out of the office, not even giving me a chance to speak. Anyway, Redrick, thanks for the status update. If anything else happens, let me know. You know where to find me. With that, he vanished through my door, leaving me alone. So, he wasn't directly condoning what I was planning, but he wasn't stopping me. Which was good. That left me some wiggle room. I sighed and slouched in my chair, as exhaustion renewed itself. Perhaps I would get some rest before I ran the errands for tomorrow. I would also have to find out when that caravan would have driven by, since I didn't want to miss out on those goods. A few hours later, the gentle rays of the morning sun caressed my eyes and pulled me from my slumber. A yawn escaped from my lips, and I sat up. The lingering effects of exhaustion sat just behind my eyes, trying to bring my eyelids together once more. But I fought it the best I could as I forced myself off the bed. I had so much that I needed to get done today. I went to the bathroom and relieved the pressure that I felt building up in my bladder before I wandered over to my closet to pick out the clothes I wanted. While I was talking to the new ward of the city, I needed something that would not flaunt wealth but also something that hinted at it. Perhaps I would have Miranda pick something out. She was always good at that stuff. Oh, how painful it was to start my day. I stumbled out of the house in a red cotton shirt with a matching pair of beige trousers that Miranda picked out for me. That woman was a gift from the gods if I was going, to be honest. I yawned once more as I brought up a city map and quickly picked out the area where the newfound ward was. It was now or never, I suppose. Calixa POV. When I awoke, it was with tears in my eyes. The memory haunted me. The pain was all too real. She wouldn't die, and it hurt me to watch that. Why wouldn't she stay dead? I was close to sobbing from the pain I felt in my heart. Empress? Words gently touched my ear, and I recognized it. With a cry, I reached up and wrapped my arms around her. Aware of how much more solid she felt under me. Alessia, you fucking idiot. I cried as I pulled her as close to me as I could. Why would she die for me? Why would she risk her life for me like that? It wasn't fair. I don't deserve someone like that. I couldn't even see the amount of tears that were pouring from my eyes. But I could hear her shift uncomfortably under my onslaught. Her arms went around me as I cried into her chest like an idiot. The walls that held back the tide of sadness and despair broke and clashed with the relief and happiness that I felt now that she was finally awake. She held me close as I sat there, sobbing into her like a child. I've been so emotional lately, and it's infuriating. It made me feel vulnerable, and that alone made me uncomfortable. I felt her hands run up and down my back as I held her for dear life. Thankfully, my heartbeat slowed, and my tears dried a bit, but it took what felt like an eternity. Alessia, I swear to you that I'll kill you myself if you do something as stupid as that again. I pulled away from her, and wiped away some of the excess tears pouring down my face, hoping that my gaze was filled with daggers to get my point across. Her face looked more human-like than before, and this time it held a small smirk. That stupid, confident smile. I understand, Empress. Without hesitation, I grabbed her shirt and pulled her towards me, mashing my lips against hers. Something that I've been aching to do for so long but haven't. My stomach fluttered, as did my heart, with each passing second. Until I broke the kiss to take a breath. I was so scared you weren't going to wake up. I sniffled slightly and pulled away, feeling slightly ashamed of my outburst. Now, Empress, not even death will keep me from you. She gazed at me with such happiness that it made my heart jump in my chest. I didn't deserve someone like her. My heart ached in so many ways. Especially after I watched her die in my dreams. It wasn't fair. I leaned forward again and chose just to wrap my arms around her. I wasn't sure what to say nor do in this situation. The act of being romantically involved with someone was alien. Have I had feelings for someone before? Yes, but to be in a functional relationship was something that I hadn't experienced before in any real capacity. Just various one-night stands and a slew of failed relationships. But this was something else, and I was terrified to lose it, and above all else, I was terrified to lose her. Please don't leave me again. The words came out in almost a quiet whimper as I sat there on the bed, pressing against her. Never. Her arms came around me and held me there as I basked in the feeling of acceptance, yet the memories of what I saw lingered there. Her death haunted me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her I saw it. In a way, it felt like I was violating her privacy, which I didn't want to do. I opened my eyes and looked across the bedroom and saw that Nyx was still deeply asleep, curled up happily in the blankets. A part of me was happy that she didn't see that. Not that I was bothered by the idea, it's just that it would lead to questions that I didn't quite know how to answer right now. I've never had to deal with telling a child that I was romantically involved with someone, and right now, it didn't seem like it was important. I pushed away from Alessia, sat back in my chair, and wiped away the rest of the tears, unsure of what to do next. Instead, some notifications appeared in the corner of my vision and were blinking violently, begging me to pay attention to them. With a quick gesture, I opened it and looked it over, and shuffled away from the notifications about the new undead that I had unlocked. Congratulations! Your boss Alessia Veers has been promoted from a boss into a zone boss. With it, a fraction of the power she once wielded in life has been returned to her. The power that courses within you has had time to settle and be strengthened. You are now designated as a boss-class entity. My eyes lingered on the text for a moment as I digested what I had just read. Alessia just received a promotion and is now a zone boss, which made her one of the single most powerful entities in the domain. I also received one, and I seem to have skipped a tier. Because of your promotion, a new class milestone has been unlocked for you. All relevant stat bonuses have been applied. Fuck, I wasn't ready to pick a new class milestone yet. I wasn't in a good mental state for that. I dismissed the screen with a heavy sigh, resolving myself to come back to it in a day or so, once I was feeling better. That way I could make a more educated choice on the matter instead of just rushing into things. But I was also curious now about Alessia. She had a tier promotion, so she had a new class now, and I was curious about it. I quickly sorted through the menus and came to her and saw that the Undead War Maiden class had vanished and was replaced with Lady of the Flowing Blade. I grew curious and decided to ply further into it upon reading that. Lady of the Flowing Blade, a rare class, only given to those who lack any sort of magic, and instead look inwards and focus solely on their martial prowess. The weapons they wield become extensions of themselves as they dedicate their lives to the pursuit of the blade, with some even able to use their souls to extend the range and power of their weapons. That looked like a mighty class, and it felt like something that she would choose. I dismissed the screen and decided to just turn my attention back to Alessia and take a second to just marvel at the differences. Her flesh was more tangible and had a slight caramel hue, yet it was still pale as if she didn't get enough sunlight. Even when I touched her, while her flesh felt as cold as ever, it felt slightly warmer than it had before. She felt more alive than she ever was before. So, are we going to do something, or are you just going to ogle me all day? Her voice yanked me from my thoughts, and I felt a tiny bit of heat rise to my cheeks, but I couldn't stop myself from retorting. So, what if I do? Are you going to stop me? I teased her back, trying to fight back the wave of embarrassment that was coursing through me. Who said I was going to? Her words came out as a sensual purr as she reached up to one button on her uniform and undid it, revealing the upper portion of her cleavage. I felt my heart jump in my chest as my eyes lingered on her breast. I watched as her hand slowly dropped to the next button, and I swallowed slowly. In my mind, I begged her to undo the next button, but I reached out and stopped her. Stop, Nyx is here, I whispered as I let my hand linger on her uniform before pulling her into a kiss to stop her from replying. However, I'll deal with you later, I growled quietly in her ear as I pulled away and tried to calm my heart rate a bit. Of course, Empress. She purred once more as her hand fell back down. For a few seconds, our gazes lingered on each other before the emotion in her eyes vanished and was replaced with a more severe side. Anyway, what have I missed? Well, Ricard is currently in a coma, and the First Legion has been devastated. We are scheduled to have a funeral tomorrow before Octavian departs on the crusade. I recounted everything that had occurred while she was out. Strangely enough, the amount of pain that I felt the first time I heard it had vanished now that I had Alessia here. It was like her presence alone made me feel like I could deal with it. Her face fell a bit, and she nodded her head. I see. Well, there is much work to be done. With fluid grace, she got out of the bed, and her feet hit the ground with an audible plop. I stood up and placed my hands on her shoulders as I felt a more protective instinct take over. No, you just woke up. I won't allow you to strain yourself. Empress. I'm all right. I promise. She spoke up and rested her hands against mine. You just woke up from being in a coma. I refuse to let you wander around. What if you get strained and fall back asleep? What if you get hurt again? I barraged her with questions as I forced her back onto the bed as gently as I could without waking up Nyx. Empress, I promise I'll be okay. If I feel anything, I'll tell you right away, okay? She gazed up at me, imploring me with her eyes. I gazed back as I tried to find some sort of excuse to make her stay and take care of herself. But I also knew that this was the most that I could get Alessia to settle on. Fine. As long as you tell me. I relented, taking the minor victory, and stepped back so she could stand up. Empress, where is your mask? She paused mid-step towards the door, and I shrugged. I didn't really care about it at the moment since all the adventurers were out of the domain. And I haven't really left her side long enough to clean it. I'll be okay with it for now. Anyway, let's take a walk and get all this stuff done. Nyx should be awake when we get back. With the Palatines here, I could leave Nyx in the guest suites since I trusted them just as much as I trusted Alessia. As you wish, Empress. She nodded, and we both walked over to the door. But just as we reached it, I stopped and turned my attention to my dearest Alessia. You forgot something. I reached out and quickly redid the button that she undid. Mine. I gave her a quick wink as I spun around and opened up the door for her, ready to get everything going once more now that I had her back. But a thought now hung in the back of my mind. Alessia, Nyx, and Karen were the most important people in my life. They kept me stable. What would I be without them? Nyx. I waited to hear the door closing before I opened my eyes and sat up. The surrounding sheets were a ruffled mess, and Mother's scent was heavy on the air. I covered my mouth as a yawn escaped from my lips. But just as the strength to do anything came, it melted away, and I flung myself back onto the bed. I was far too aware of the grin that had taken residence on my face as I stretched out as much as possible and claimed the bed for my own. Yes, this was all mine now. I rolled around for some time, basking in the sheer size of the bed. Big was good. After a while, I grew bored with claiming the bed as my own and sat up once more. My mind wandered back to the scene that I saw between Mother and Alessia. The way they interacted with each other was different, but it made sense. I've seen the gazes that Ms. Alessia would give her, and at first I thought it was weird. But my mother said little about it. I crossed my arms and thought about it, but the right word didn't come. I needed more information on the matter. Perhaps Mr. Karen would know more. Yes, he would, why wouldn't he? I would need to find him immediately. With my mind made up, I jumped off the bed and quickly smoothed out my dress. Otherwise, Mother would throw a fit. I skipped to the door and pushed it open, revealing a dark hallway. Motes of dusk caught the faint rays of light that radiated from the guest room and danced ever so softly on the non-existent wind. The walls, though I've seen them dozens of times, I could pick out each slight cut and every tiny ridge. I sniffed a few times to lock onto Mother's scent to see what direction she went. It differed from anyone else here. It was lively, with just a hint of flowers. Much like the place that we went to earlier in the day. Once I was happy, I looked around, and my eyes fell on the two guards that stood by the door. The ones that stood as still as statues and didn't really react too much. But they were an obstacle to cross. Mother said I had to beat them to prove that I could take care of myself, and I would no matter what it took. I told her I would beat death one day, and I meant it. I'm going to go find Mr. Karen. I require his assistance on some matters. Without looking at the two, I walked down the hallway, trying to discern the scent of my teacher. It wasn't easy, with the hundreds of unique smells that filled the air. Picking out one was difficult. But I kept walking, following just behind my mother's trail. Until finally, I picked it up. It was faint and smelled like dried bone, with a touch of cloth, but what really set it apart was the small splash of stagnant water that seemed to permeate it. I skipped down the hall, humming a tune. I didn't quite know what it meant, but Mother seemed to hum it often enough, which meant that it was good enough for me. Now, where is Mr. Karen at? I paused at an intersection and gave another tentative sniff, trying to discern his scent once more. Here, it seemed a little more pungent. My head whipped to the left as I locked onto the scent, and I followed down the hall. A few of Mother's soldiers were here and were gazing at each other, no doubt locked in conversation. For the most part, I was left in the dark on what they were saying, but Karen taught me a few key things when it came to what the undead was saying. For example, a quick chatter of the jaw in roughy quarter-second intervals conveyed slight annoyance. But a chitter at half-second intervals was amusing. It was complicated, but I forced myself to learn it. I enjoyed the experience of learning, it made me feel strong. I wanted to be the strongest dragon there ever was, and I won't let anyone stand in the way. I skipped further down the hall until I came to the path that led to the classroom. Mother's scent here was faint, which told me she hadn't been down there in a little while. Perhaps she and Miss Alessia went outside. Good, maybe I could get back to the guest room before she returned. I shrugged, knowing that if Mother caught me out, she might be angry, but I had questions I needed answered before I saw her again. I glided down the hall and towards the enormous double doors of the classroom. Without a second thought, I reached out and pressed the doors open. At first, they resisted me, but I kept on pushing. The dull sound of metal scraping against itself filled the room and reverberated in my ears. It was a heavy door, but that was okay. It wouldn't stop me. Once I finished opening it, I stood triumphantly in the middle of the classroom. It was entirely empty for the first time since I've been here. Save my teacher, who was sitting on a chair, reading a book. His flowing black cloak was utterly flawless and without a single wrinkle and drank in all the light that touched it. His hood was down, revealing his bones. On them I could see dozens of small cuts and imperfections that lined them, and with each day, it seemed like a new one was added. The thought of something taking my mother from me made me angry. So very angry. She was my mother, and I refused to let anything have her. But there has to be a way. What if I get stronger? Could I fight death? He chuckled once more and sat forward. Years ago, the mistress fought death to wrestle control of the souls of her people. Because she did that. We live once more, but you need to realize that to deny death is unnatural, just as it is unnatural to bring death earlier than it is intended. To live, there needs to be balance, and that balance happens to be death. I listened to his story, fully enthralled. I always knew that my mother was strong, but hearing it reaffirmed that thought. It made me proud. I think I understand. But it still doesn't make me happy. I don't like feeling powerless. We all feel powerless at some point in our lives, and there is no shame in that. It's what we do about it that matters the most. I nodded my head in agreement. Good, I was glad that I came to Mr. Karen for help. He was wise indeed. I got out of my desk and walked over to him. A lot of what was troubling me had vanished, but it still left me with all kinds of thoughts that still needed answers, but those had to wait. I needed to get back to the guest suite now. I threw my arms around him and pulled him into a hug. Thank you so much. Oh, before I go, I have one last question. Mother often refers to you as a grandfather. Are you really her grandfather? Perhaps I am, little dragon, perhaps I am. He gave me a soft chuckle, and one of his eyes flickered as if he just winked at me, leaving me with another question that I sadly didn't have time for. Hello, Mr. Karen. I called out as I rushed into the room. Excitement coursed through my veins as I crossed the room and clambered onto the desk near the front. Oh, hello there, little dragon. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. His words were steady and didn't roll the same way everyone else did. But I could hear a faint sense of surprise based solely on how his jaw moved. I had some questions that I needed answered, but I wanted to do it in private. I settled into my chair and eyed the two guards that flowed into the room. They were utterly silent, and the only way I knew they were there sometimes was based on their clothing. Is that so? If your mother discovered that you ran off at a time like this, she would be furious with you. He reached out, took a thin piece of paper, placed it on the book he was reading, and closed it. His red eyes flickered softly, and his jaw chittered in amusement. I know, but I should be back in bed before she returns. She went out with Alessia not too long ago. She said something about running errands, so I figured I had some time. I stretched out across the desk and yawned slightly. You are a troublesome child. He clicked his jaws together and set the book to the side. So, what is it you want to know? I felt a grin cross my face as I set my chin down on the cool wooden desk. He often called me trouble, but I knew he didn't mean it. After all, I'm a dragon, which means I'm perfect. Mr. Karen, what is Mother and Miss Alessia's relationship? Mother started acting strange when she woke up, and I've never seen her like that. Did you bother to ask her? He crossed his arms slightly and regarded me slightly. The flames in his eyes gently burned this time, much like a freshly lit candle. No. She hasn't told me. But I'm trying to understand. I saw them do something strange with their lips, and it didn't make sense. In all the time that I've known Mother, I've only seen her do something like that with Miss Alessia. I felt the muscles on my face scrunch up a little as I tried to figure out what it meant. Clearly, Mother cares about Alessia, but in a way that differs from everyone. Just like how she cared about me. I felt a strange feeling coil in my chest, and I wasn't sure how to feel until I heard Mr. Karen chuckle. Ah, is that jealousy that I hear? He asked as he leaned forward. As he said that, the name and the emotion clicked together, but I wasn't sure why I was feeling it. I think so, but I don't know why. I was struggling to put it together, or at least understand why. Is it because you are perhaps threatened by Alessia? Though his voice was as monotonous as ever, I could tell that he was trying to coax me into the right path. Something he often did during class when I was struggling with something. No, never. I adore Miss Alessia. But I really thought about it as I tried to put the words together. I think I feel jealous because I want all of my mother's love. The thought of sharing just feels strange. There is nothing wrong with that. Due to how busy the mistress is, you don't get to spend as much time with her as you like, so you feel left out. He nodded his head slightly as he softly mashed his jaw together. Exactly. I was finally happy that I figured out a portion of what I felt. I wasn't jealous because of Miss Alessia. It simply bothered me because Mother doesn't spend as much time with me as she should. Perhaps I should have a discussion with her about this when she returns. But I still had more questions. But why does Mother treat her like that? I've never seen her do that with someone else. That. He trailed off for a moment, and his eyes seemed to shimmer for a split second before he continued. Is something that you need to discuss with the mistress. However, it's nothing to worry about. That answer was rather annoying. I huffed at him as I sat up and crossed my arms. But Karen, I want to know. Sometimes, little dragon, you need to be patient. Let them figure out what they are first, then when your mother is ready, she will tell you. If you rush it, it could lead to some problems down the road. I hated that he was right. He often told me that Mother was impulsive and wasn't patient at times, and it usually led to paying for it later on. It was something that I still struggled with since when I wanted stuff, I wanted it then, not later. But I couldn't deny the pleasure I felt about finally getting it. Fine. I relented, for now at least. But I still couldn't deny the curiosity that burned within me. Also, I have another question for you. When Mother and I went out earlier today, she mentioned something about death and how it comes for us all. Is there a way to stop it? Many have tried, many beings far more powerful than your mother and me. But death always claims what it is due. He adjusted himself slightly in his seat. He's been like this for a while, I told Alessia as I stood over Ricard. His eyes were closed, and his uniform was freshly changed and covered a myriad of fresh scars. His sword was clenched in both hands, and the blade was pointed down, and the hilt rested softly against his chest. Do you know what's wrong? Alessia's sweet voice rang gently in my ear as I stared at my fallen captain. The guilt weighed on my heart. I felt guilty because I could have saved him. But instead, I put my daughter ahead of him and then Alessia. Maybe if I was faster, I could have saved him and maybe even more of my soldiers. They were all mine, and they trusted me. Did I betray that? He is in a coma. Karen said he would never awaken outside of defending the stronghold and the domain. But in any other regard, he will remain like this. The words tasted bitter as they left my tongue. What a horrible fate to be trapped in something like that. It was my fault. Empress, it isn't your fault. Her words stopped me from falling any further into the depths of my mind. I could feel tears burning in the corner of my eyes as I tried to stop them from falling. I tried to tell myself that, but I can't help but feel like it is. They are all my men. I could have done more to save them. I could have saved Ricard. Alessia took my hand in hers as she stood there. Trust me when I tell you that there is nothing you could have done differently. Ricard would have marched him and his men out 1,000 times and happily gave his life each time. Don't blame yourself for that. Her thumb gently traced a path against the back of my hand as she spoke. I sighed as I stood there. I know she was right. That's how he has always been. That's how I made him. I calmed myself a bit as I thought about her words. In a way, it was still my fault, but I needed to stop blaming myself. This was Ricard's choice at the end of the day. But I will still mourn over him, as he was one of the first bosses I ever made. I reached out and laid my hand against him. His decaying flesh cool against my touch. Rest well, Captain, I told him as I gave him a soft pat. At least, in the end, he earned his rest. What's next, Empress? Alessia asked as I retracted my hand away from the fallen captain. I want to meet up with Karen and figure out a few things, and then we need to host this funeral. I crossed my arms and worked on my plan. Octavian will be here until after the funeral, and then he and the entire Second Legion will depart, along with all the mercenaries that had gathered here. I needed to rebuild the First Legion, and with the captain only being able to wake up to defend the stronghold, he needed a replacement. That means I will promote Flint and need to find another unit to replace him as the lieutenant. I strummed my fingers against my arm as I tried to think about what I wanted to do. At least until nothing else came up. With a sigh, I turned away from Ricard and motioned for Alessia to follow me. I needed to get away from this room and process some of my emotions. We wandered down the hallway, almost aimlessly, for a bit, at least until a thought floated across my mind. It was a strange one, but something that I felt would do me well. Alessia, how would you feel if I traveled outside Asturian territory? I knew what she was going to say, and I was going to figure out how to talk her into it. But it was about time that I made my appearance in the outside world. I wanted to make my presence known and that I will not tolerate the actions taken here the last few days. Plus, it would allow me to go outside and purchase equipment and resources that I would otherwise not have access to. The only downside would be that I would lack access to my domain for the time I would be out there and could be open to attack. She tensed up slightly, and she shook her head. I dislike the idea. It makes me uncomfortable. There are so many variables at play that I can't control, making me fear for your safety. Then let's figure out what we can do to ensure my safety then. We can expand the Palatine Guard so that we have a central security force. Besides, with you next to me, I doubt anyone will have the heart to attack me. Plus, I'll also reach out and inform Redrick I will visit for diplomatic reasons and trade. It's highly doubtful that he will let such a valuable trade partner come to harm, no? I gazed into her eyes, trying to read what she was feeling. As usual, she was hard to read outside of extreme events. But I think I cracked her shell just a little with that statement. I suppose so, but it will take a few days to create a couple more Palatines. They are expensive and complicated to make. That said, if you want to bring Nyx along, we will have to wait for a while since I refuse to let her leave the area with no guards. But I will also need time to create a cohesive plan for your safety. I gazed into her eyes for a moment as I tried to think some more things through. I could move my legion with me, but I don't think the outside world would be alright with that, so I would have to settle with the Palatines. But I also didn't want to wait for a few weeks, and I refused to leave Nyx behind. It wouldn't be fair to her. Create a handful of Palatines in no more than a few days. I'll bring along a few Legion members with me, and we can give Nyx the Palatines to protect her. That, mixed with whatever detail Redrick would give us, should be enough, no? But if Nyx takes all the Palatines, then what about you? I can't let you remain unguarded. She crossed her arms and stared at me, and I could feel the biting touches of frustration in her words. But I won't be. I have you, after all. I flashed her a smile and shifted my weight to the side as I pressed myself into her. With you, I feel as safe as could be. Besides, I can take care of myself, you know. If it makes you feel better, I'll select my next class before we leave. She rested her head against mine as we both basked in the silence for some time. I really liked that she felt so protective of me. I also couldn't be angry at it because I was even more so over her. But I really wanted to leave the domain for a bit. It would be nice to get some fresh air and let Nyx out for some time. Not to mention the sheer amount of resources I could rake in since I had access to the currency they used. But I had some questions for Karen before I left. Fine, but I have a few conditions. The first is that you select your next class. The second is that you find a fighting style you like and stick to it. Being diverse is good, but I'll feel better knowing that you have a focus on one. If you do, I will do my best to create the next class of Palatines so we can venture out. But you also need to keep a tighter leash on Nyx. She can be a bit on the exploitative side. I winced slightly as Alessia spoke. She was right. I had a habit of bouncing around and learning everything that I could. But now, I needed to focus on only one fighting style. Lately, I've been really enjoying close combat without a sword. There was just something about fighting someone with my fist that I really enjoyed. Maybe it was the power, maybe it was something more. I didn't know. Deal. I'll figure it out. Also, what do you mean? I caught on to her last words. It sounded like Nyx, but the way she worded it made me think there was something more. Nyx has a habit of wandering around. It makes guarding her a pain. However, I'm not saying it's bad, but she can be a handful. As we spoke, Alessia laced an arm around my waist, dragging me further into her. Not that I minded since we were by ourselves. It was the only time I allowed the affection since I wanted to keep up the public image. But I would never deny that we were together. I didn't want to punish that aspect of Nyx. She was curious about the world, and I wanted her to experience it. But I agree it would be bad if I let her wander around an area we didn't know. So I would put a leash on her and keep her close, but I would do it in a way that wouldn't be overbearing. I see. I'll talk to her. Anyway, let's go find Karen. I have a few questions for him. I walked down the sprawling hallway quietly. The various soldiers in the hallways saluted me before continuing with what they were doing. My mood had already lifted, and it was strange how fast it occurred. It was almost like a whisper in the back of my mind that took away a lot of what was bothering me. Alessia was next to me, quietly walking, keeping herself about 4 paces away from me. Ever so close, yet so far away. But sadly, this has to be done. I pulled my eyes away from her and back down the hallway. Torches and scones lined the length of the hallway, casting rays of warm orange light that filled the air. My mind felt a little hazy today, but I wasn't sure why. Maybe it's because I was tired. It has been emotionally exhausting the last few days, so maybe that was why. Maybe it was a part of the Whispers trait still affecting me. I sighed as I walked, trying to get a hold of the flurry of emotions running rampant through me. It felt like it was a perpetual tempest that was cascading through my mind, and there was very little that actually kept me grounded. "Are you all right, Empress?" Alessia broke the silence between us as we walked down the hallway. "Just a lot on my mind. Maybe I just need to sleep it off." I shrugged and gave her a soft smile, unsure if I wanted to get into what I was dealing with, at least for now. I just needed to sort it all out, at least before I felt comfortable talking about it, especially with her. She remained silent for a few minutes as we walked. The sounds of our footsteps echoed down the hallway, filling the air between us. At least until she broke the silence once more. "I understand, Empress. I'm here for you when you are ready to talk." "Thank you, Alessia." I felt a tiny bit of weight fall off my shoulders as she dropped the topic. It meant a lot to me that she would give me some space. Silence settled in between us once more as we walked further down the hallway, which I was thankful for since it gave me some time to think. But it wasn't painful silence either. Sometimes it's just nice being with someone. "Hello, Karen." I gently rapped on the classroom door as I pushed it open, announcing my presence for him. Though it was a bit of a struggle to keep my excitement contained. I pushed the door open and wandered into the classroom. Dozens of empty seats filled the room and sat in a semicircle around the chalkboard, which was utterly barren. He was sitting in front of a desk with his feet resting on the top of it. In his hand was a book on magical theory that was propped open about halfway through. "Oh, Empress, hello." He pulled his eyes away from the book and towards me. "Alessia, it is good to see you awake." His words felt like they were a little more lively, though that may just be me projecting that onto him. It could even mean that he may be evolving. "Lord Karen." Alessia stepped into the room and gave him a slight bow. He gently clicked his teeth together as he regarded us with eyes that burned like a gentle flame. "What can I do for you two ladies?" He gently closed his book and placed it on the table as he pulled his legs off it. "Well, I stopped by because I wanted to talk to you about a few things." I glided into the room and sat at one of the empty desks near him while Alessia stood close by. His teeth quickly clattered together, much like a quiet chuckle as he leaned forward at his desk. "I am always happy to assist you, mistress." I adjusted my cloak slightly as I stretched my legs out at the desk. A strange sense of nostalgia settled in my stomach as I thought back to my high school days. That all felt like an eternity ago. "Well, I guess my first would be, how are you doing, Karen? We haven't really spoken in a while." He rested his hands on top of his desk and interlaced his fingers. He regarded me with what I could only consider amusement. "I am well enough. I'm just here, shambling my way through life the best that I can." I swore at that moment that I could see who he used to be in life. He was a suave, handsome man with tousled black hair and a soft smirk etched into his face. His eyes were guarded yet were filled with eternal life and no small amount of mirth. I smirked at him and stretched out in the seat and crossed my arms. "Ah, well, that's good to hear. I'm currently struggling with the whisper trait right now. It's like a constant murmur in my mind, and I struggle to think straight with it. Lately, though, it's been playing with my emotions and making me feel out of whack, especially with everything that has happened here the last few days. A part of me feels relief, the other part guilt, another apathy. I'm just unsure about everything, really." He bobbed his head as he leaned forward. "Mistress, if I may, it's perfectly natural to feel all that, and it isn't just the Whispers trait. As a leader, you need to mourn for losing your soldiers. As a person, it's acceptable to mourn the passing, but to also be relieved to know that their suffering has been relieved. But the biggest thing to realize is that as a leader, choices must be made. However, with those choices comes a certain level of emotional detachment that has to be involved." His words came out in slow, measured cadence as if he were considering the best thing to say. "So, are you saying that I shouldn't spare them the thought?" I crossed my arms and tried to process his words. Being cold was something I never considered, and I didn't think I had the heart for something like that. "Not exactly, mistress. Perhaps you are sparing them too much of a thought. The price of the crown is heavy, even more so when you try to shoulder the weight of others." His eyes flickered like a soft flame on the wind as he stared at me. His fingers twitched ever so softly as he spoke. "I think I understand." I broke my gaze away from Karen, and it dropped towards the table. He was right, after all. I let my feelings for everyone seep into my mind and affect me. It wasn't wrong that I felt this way for my soldiers or my people. No, I should embrace it, but I won't let that weigh me down. "Good, now, I know you didn't come down here just to discuss that. What else is bothering you? I pulled my eyes back towards him and tried to sort through my thoughts. Well, I wanted to discuss a few other things. For example, my system seems to be slowly changing. It's something that I haven't really paid attention to until recently. He pulled his fingers apart and sat back in his chair. Well, we have to consider a few things. The first is that this is a domain. For all intents and purposes, this is a world within a world. But above all else, the traits that govern this place are rather powerful and seem to sway the system's strength. Wait, I don't even really know what the system is. I always just assumed that it was just some sort of computer. It was a topic that I really haven't delved too far into. Mostly, I've been too far in my own world to consider anything else. Well, I'm not sure what a computer is, but I can tell you that the system is a purely magical construct that helps quantize and categorize. One of the biggest traits of the system is that no two people share the same. As he slid back, his chair scraped against the ground, and he pulled open a drawer and withdrew a book. The cover was only 3 centimeters thick and was the color of freshly tilled dirt. Wait, I'm the only one who sees the system as a video game? I suppose I should have looked further into things instead of gliding past them. But really, it was something that I just didn't care about too much. He clacked his teeth together as he placed the book on the desk. I have no idea what a video game is, but again, the system only reflects what you perceive it as. For example, I see everything as a book or part of a play. I see everything as a message sent or carrier pigeons. Alessia spoke up next to me, and I glanced over at her. She was seated at one desk close by and up as straight as a rod. Her hands sat on each other, and her legs were crossed. She was so prim and proper, and I couldn't help but see her as anything but adorable. That's interesting. But why is the system slowly fading away from me? I pulled my gaze away from Alessia and back towards Karen. Well, honestly, I don't have an actual answer. Many unawakened undead don't have connections to a system, so it's possible that what they perceive is slowly overpowering the domain. I would expect the system to continue to fade, and many restrictions imposed upon you will vanish. His eyes roared for a moment as he gazed off into the distance before they faded once more back into the familiar crimson flame that barely illuminated the abyss within his eyes. The masses have always held the most power. Seeing it in such a display here is a stark reminder of it all. It was terrifying that the mindless undead masses seemed to have the most power. Their thoughts alone were shaping the domain. But as that thought went through my mind, I heard a whisper in the back of my mind. One that I recognized as my voice. They are but a listless stream with no path or direction. But with your guidance, they can be a flood that wipes away everything on your path. The voice in my head was faint, yet it was filled with certainty and confidence. But just as quickly as it came, it vanished. Perhaps it was right. If the unawakened undead had this much power, I may need to whisper back. I would need to manipulate the masses and maneuver them into a spot that would benefit me. Was it manipulation? Yes, but it would be for the greater good. My reservation slowly melted away and was replaced by a sense of purpose. All that mattered would be the safety of the Empire and its future direction. Karen, I think I'm going to slide in a few things to see if I can influence them. Since they seem to have so much power, let's use that. The flames in his eyes danced as he regarded me. At that moment, I could almost swear that I saw his face twist into a grin. I like the way you think, mistress. To stay on top of things, we must use everything at our disposal. Doubly so if you want to keep your foundation stable. I pursed my lips slightly and nodded my head. I wanted to be an empress, but that meant that I had to act like one. There would be some hard choices that I would have to make. But sometimes the right choice isn't a good one. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate the help. I dropped the topic and moved on to something else. Karen, I decided I wanted to leave the domain for a bit. Partly for diplomatic reasons, and so I can get away for a bit. That said, it would allow you some time for a vacation. Thinking back, I wasn't sure where the idea came from for leaving, but I couldn't help but agree with it. That. He trailed for a few seconds as if he was taken aback by what I said. Is rather bold of you. It was something that I didn't expect you would do. But there are a few merits to it. He sat back forward in his chair and interlaced his fingers. Yeah, but it's something that I wanted to talk to you about first. Will I be able to read anything from the outside world? Is it a good idea? I let a few questions that were on my mind slip out. Well, I can already see a few good things that would come from that. But the bigger question is, are you ready to do something like that? I stared up at him as I chewed on his words. Was I ready? Possibly. I was still trying to grow into the mold I had made for myself, and the only way I could keep growing was by putting myself into the situations that would force me to grow, not just as a person but as an empress. So with that being said, even if I'm not ready, I would have to do it, regardless. Honestly, Karen, I'm not sure if I'm ready. But it's a chance to get out and actually get a bearing on the outside world. But above all else, it gives me a chance to purchase certain goods that otherwise would have been out of my grasp. It felt like it was an excuse to just get out of here for a bit. He slowly bobbed his head and brought his jaw together with a soft click. Interesting. Naturally, for your sake, I would like to decline, but the fact that you brought it up to me means that you have already decided to leave. It's just a matter of when. A nervous chuckle escaped from my lips. Ah, he knows me too well. Yeah, I've already decided, but I already know what I need to work on beforehand. What would that be then? He tilted his head slightly, and his eyes pulsed once more. Sometimes I wasn't sure about him. Was he curious, or was he prying to get me to figure it out on my own? Well, I'm going to lock in my next class and decide on an actual combat path. I've been a bit of a hybrid for too long, and I should really master something. A jack of all trades but master of none. He brought his teeth together once more and nodded his head slowly. The quote reminded me of home but also of my father. But as I was about to speak and agree with him, he spoke up again. But often, it's better than a master of one. I didn't realize that the quote continued, I murmured as I thought back to all the times my dad often used that quote. He really didn't like when I was working on too many things at once. I could strongly remember each time he was angry with me. To get anywhere in life, you must set your sights on a single specialty. A jack of all trades will have no one's respect. Something that he often told me and something that I often ignored. Few do realize that. But being a jack of all trades isn't exactly a bad thing. It gives you a certain depth of knowledge that mastering something just can't match. Instead of forcing yourself to walk down a set path, use your general knowledge to your advantage. You may find it beneficial. His left eye flickered slightly as if he had just winked at me. But what he said made so much sense. I knew how to use a blade but also how to use my fist. I knew how to shoot a bow and use my soul. If I just took one path, everything I took the time to learn would go to waste. Instead, I want to choose a class that combines everything into one and kept expanding my knowledge base. I see. Thank you, Karen. I pulled my gaze upwards once more and smiled at him. He did a lot, and I was so thankful for it. I would be so lost without him. So, while you are here, tell me, how are things in your romantic life? As soon as I registered what he said, I could detect a very strong amount of amusement in his voice. But how did he find out? I could feel the familiar twinge of heat as it settled into my cheeks. I'm not sure what you are talking about. Quickly, without a second thought, I fell into a defensive mode. Not that I didn't trust Karen, I wasn't expecting that he knew. Come now, mistress. There isn't much that happens here in the domain that I don't know about. Again, as he stared at me, I swore I could see a smile cross the skeleton's face. I was hoping to keep it a secret. Not because I'm embarrassed, but because I wanted to keep it a secret for almost everyone. I didn't want the world to know. It's going well. I'm happy, and I assume she's happy as well. My gaze floated over to Alessia, and another smile slowly spread. I'm very happy indeed, Alessia spoke up, and I saw her look at me from the corner of her eyes. I gave her a quick wink before shifting my gaze back to my advisor. But why do you ask? The previous conversation had left my mind, forgotten by the shock of Karen asking about my relationship. Well, Nyx has brought it up. She knows that something is going on between you two, and she is struggling to figure out what. I would recommend talking to her and explaining everything, otherwise, she may come to her own conclusions, which would be disastrous. I sighed in defeat upon hearing what he had to say. I didn't want Nyx to know just yet. But now that puts me in a really tight spot. What did she say? She has noticed that you and Alessia do certain things in private, which sparked questions I didn't answer. However, I will say that she is growing jealous of it. So perhaps that is something that should be taken care of. His fingers kept clenching before relaxing a bit. I quickly thought back to the instances when she could have seen Alessia together like that. But I came up blank. Each time she was asleep or occupied. The only time that Alessia and I had done stuff like that in front of her wasn't too long ago. Karen, did she visit you recently? He remained silent for a few seconds, his eyes flickering in varying brightness before his teeth clattered in what sounded like a sigh. She has, but I didn't want her to earn your ire for something natural. I pinched my nose and shook my head. Now I understand what Alessia was getting at. I'm not mad at her. She has questions and seeks answers on her own, which makes me happy. But it's also frustrating that she sneaks around to do it. Nyx is very strong-willed, and we know she doesn't do the things she does maliciously. However, she can be a bit impulsive. He eyed me strangely for a moment, and I knew exactly what he was getting at. Like mother, like daughter. I'll talk to her. I nodded my head and mentally sighed. It was something that I was going to have to nip as soon as possible. Alessia, darling, would you mind grabbing Nyx for me? I turned my head towards her and flashed her a soft smile. While I could do it, I wanted privacy with Karen, so I could air out some stuff that was really bothering me. Not that I didn't trust Alessia, but I didn't know how to approach some things with her. Of course, Empress. She stood up, gave me a slight bow, and spun on her heel. But just before she could step away, I reached out and grabbed her shirt. Where do you think you are going? Her head shot to me, and confusion danced through her eyes as clear as day. To get Nyx, like you asked? Yes, I know, but you forgot something. I laced my words with sternness and forced a frown into my face. She was squirming, and I enjoyed that. Really, she was okay, I just wanted her to be a little flustered before I swooped in for the kill. What? She turned back around, and her confusion gave way to shock. As if she couldn't believe that she had messed up. This, I told her as I stood up, gripped her uniform, and pulled her into a deep kiss. One that lasted far longer than it should have, but I didn't care. Karen already knew, so there was nothing to hide. For a few minutes, I just held her close, enjoying the chill that radiated from her lips into mine before I pushed her away. Now, you may leave. She stared at me, stunned before she turned around and walked away. Mentally, I chuckled at the fact that I left her speechless. God, she was so perfect. I bit my lip and relished the last bit of the chill that bit into my flesh. I tore my gaze away from her backside as I watched her walk away, shifted it back towards Karen, and cleared my throat. Anyway. I trailed off, at least until the sound of the door closing filled the room. There is something bothering me I haven't really talked about before. Instead of replying, Karen sat there and just patiently waited. Which I was thankful for. It gave me a chance to figure out what I wanted to say. When the domain was attacked, I was scared that Nyx would get hurt. So when I returned to the stronghold, I was so angry, and when I found Nyx, I felt better. Until I found out, Alessia stayed behind. At that moment, I was so scared that she would die. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my heartbeat a bit. The memories of everything threatened to disrupt the delicate balance that I had found. And when I got there, I saw Alessia was still fighting, and she was clearly outnumbered, but she kept fighting. I was so angry that they were hurting her, so I fought them. Karen, I killed someone that day, and was merciless while doing it. My breath came out in ragged bursts as tears brimmed across my eyes. It was a thought that was plaguing me, but I did my best to ignore it. I was doing well at not thinking about it, but I knew I had to talk if I wanted it to get better. Empress, in your line of work, killing is something that will come whether you like it or not. However, if you think you are a monster because of it, I can assure you that you aren't. He stood up from his desk and walked over to me. The sounds of bone hitting concrete filled the room as he quickly came toward me. Tears gathered at the corner of my eyes, and I dropped my hands down towards my pants and clenched the fabric between my fingertips as I fought the surge of emotion. What really bothers me is that I felt nothing when I did it. He screamed and fought me, but I didn't care, and when life left him, I just tossed him to the side. I felt a hand rest on my shoulder as I stared down at the table, unwilling to look at him. There, mistress. The fact that you are feeling like that is a good sign. But you are not a monster. You were defending Alessia and Nyx, but you were also defending your domain. There is nothing to be afraid of, nor a reason to be distraught. You did what you had to do. Nothing more, and nothing less. He pulled me into a hug, and I screwed my eyes shut and embraced him. I did what I had to do, didn't I? But was it my place to take someone's life? I didn't know, and that was bothering me. It felt like a part of me died when I killed that man. No, not die, that was the wrong word. I changed that day. Karen, there's more. I sucked in a deep breath as I kept my eyes shut. While I was waiting for Alessia to wake up, I saw how she died. Karen, she wouldn't stay dead. She kept getting back up. As I spoke, the tears broke through the dam I had erected around them. It was all just so much, and it was so horrible. I just haven't told Alessia that I know yet. It just felt like it wasn't something for me to know, but now that I've seen it, I don't think I'll be able to get it out of my head. I felt a pair of bony hands on my back as he just held me there, and I bawled. I cried at how horrible the memories were and the memories that the undead had formed. It wasn't fair, and all this time, I was just hiding the pain that it all caused me. I'm just not sure how to deal with it. We all cope in different ways with the pain. I find mine in music and a playwright. Nyx finds her in learning, and Alessia has hers in training and duty. We all suffer, and we all have our own way of coping. You just have to find yours. I felt his hands gently pat my back as I just buried my head into his cloak. I needed to find a way to cope. Something that wasn't Alessia or Nyx. Something that helped me get through life. I cooked, but I don't think I want to sully that. But I'm not sure right now. This is too much to bear for me. I pulled away from Karen and wiped away some tears pouring down my face. Thanks. I needed that. I sniffled a bit and tried to fix my hair the best that I could. Alessia and Nyx would be here soon, and I didn't want them to worry about me. He stared at me for a moment, though I couldn't seem to read any set of emotions. His eyes were as vibrant as always as he stared into me. You are welcome, mistress. He gave me one last pat before he wandered back to his desk. With graceful ease, he glided across the ground. His cloak fluttered in the wind caused by the draft of his movement. I sniffled, sat in my seat a bit, and cleared my throat. I was still hurting, but I felt better than before. You said, playwright? What do you enjoy about it? Well, there is something about a play that is enthralling. Creating a scene and letting the actors play it out. It's beautiful if I do say so myself. He adjusted his cloak before he sat down. Yeah, that sounds like it is. I chuckled as I thought about the irony of it. This was much like a play, at least with how it was set up. It was a play that became all too real. Maybe soon I can show you one of my latest works. But it's not a play. It is a song that I wrote for my class. It's called The Death of a Phoenix. He sat down in his chair. You know, I think I've only seen your class in action a few times. I would like to see what it does. I cleared my throat once more and wiped away the rest of the tears that were pouring down my face. Hopefully, that was the last, for now at least. I prefer not to fight. It's vulgar and uncivilized if you ask me. But, I would be willing to duel with Alessia, if anything, to showcase my abilities. That would be nice. She just got a new class I would like to see in action. Besides, I think it would be a fantastic chance to hear your music. I smiled softly at him and adjusted my cloak to smooth away all the wrinkles. Now all I had to do was just wait for Alessia and Nyx to get here. Do you know what you will choose for your new class? He reached out towards the book on his desk and picked it up, sensing that the conversation that we were having was taking a turning point. Not yet, I'll have to take a look, but I was waiting till my mental state adjusted a bit. I replied as my eyes lazily shifted to the notifications. Maybe I should look at that real quick.